What up, everybody? Welcome to Coffee Hour Friday. I'm your host, Paul Abernathy. Thanks for joining me, taking the time out of your day to be here with me. I know it takes a lot because, again, people are hounding on you to get stuff done. I know it's at the weekend. We're almost there. We can taste it. We still got to get through the day, make some money, make some connections, grow our business, and all those things we do. If you're in business for yourself, you're actually really doing that 7 days a week. You know that. There is no break for the self employed. You're working for somebody, you're helping them grow their business, be successful, doing what you need to do. But the weekend's almost here. But we got to get through today. So, again, thank you all for taking the time to join me. Now, before I get started today, and we're going to end our series today, so I can tell you, as Adam will tell you, there's a high probability that we're going to put an S on the end of ours today, just to be able to make sure I cover everything that I want to cover. We are going to be talking about probably my most favorite topic of anything is when I talk about grounding and bonding. Not just because I said on Code Panel 5, that's irrelevant, because before I got on Code Panel 5, grounding and bonding was my favorite topic to talk about, because there's so many little pieces and there's so many discussions you can have around grounding and bonding, and it seems so simple. I've been having a great conversation with a gentleman. I told y'all about a little bit yesterday. For those that didn't check it out, this is part 8. So there are 7 other parts to this that I encourage folks to go back and watch. And you can pull out little gems from all of those other parts. Hopefully today will give you something. But we've been having a discussion about the equipment grounded conductor and free conductor and length and things like that when it comes into a box. And it's always amazing when you get into those discussions that you see that everybody does have opinions, and everybody has, can formulate different opinions on things. And we have to be respectful of everybody's opinion. And I think that's one of the problems that we fall into for the more, I guess, boisterous electricians, whereas we want to challenge, and we're a very challenging bunch. The electricians always are. I have been. And I like a good debate, but always remember it's a debate. Everybody has an opinion, that type of thing. So, respectful for it. Sometimes somebody's opinion is wrong, but you can be very respectful of that type of thing. But again, it's always good discussion, good debate. Everybody learns, or at least everybody sees an opinion, and that's always great. So, been having a great discussion. I don't do a lot of TikTok discussions, that type of thing. So I get Quad. You posted that question over on Facebook. This is not the place for that. I whatever. Okay, so thanks for joining me here this morning, and we're going to go through and let you know we're going to be getting into finishing up our services, and we'll be finishing up the equipment, but we're really focused on grounding and bonding today, and then we'll move a little bit deeper into it. Try to end this today. Okay, I have a number of slides we'll move through, that type of thing. So, anywho, let's do some shout outs real quick so we can get into this and get started, as I always do first. And folks that are watching the replay of this, you can always fast forward. Okay, that's the one beautiful thing about watching replays is you can fast forward if you don't want to see the shout outs. It's okay. You have total control over your whatever you want to do. Okay, you can drag that little bar back and forth, do whatever you want to do. In the live, you have no choice, but in the others, you can do it. So let's see here. Paul, thanks for joining me, Paul. Glad to have you here. That's it for you, Paul. What's up, Adam? Adam's in the house. Thanks for joining. Family is good. Let's roll with some code. Frank is happy. It's Friday, getting to the end of the week. Let's see here. What do we got here? Cray Cray's in the house. What's up, Cray Cray? Glad to have you here. Music City, Nashville. Love it. Good morning. Frank's doing a shout out to everybody. That's what I love to see. Everybody, camaraderie. There you go. Electricians, we all got to work together. What's up? High Voltage Hands is in the house. Glad to have you here. Haas is in the house. Glad to have you here, Haas. Down here in Richmond. Good morning, Rob. Glad to have you here. Let's see, what do we got here? Thomas. Welcome is in the house. I'll get back to your email, Thomas. Any of those days will be fine. I shouldn't have any issue with any of those days. Just pick one you want. And as far as doing so I'll answer it now. So that saves me an email. Thomas said, Thomas is a CMECP candidate, and he's moved through all of the online. So if any of you are interested in the CMECP program, you probably are not going to work through it as quick as Tom did. Okay, I mean, he's very quickly through it and did very well. Some people take the full. Now, it used to be 6 months to finish, and we had, and then it had quite a few more questions that this one doesn't. So the CMECP program has evolved a little bit. It was tougher back when it was the 6-month program because it also had 23 exams you had to finish, not just the competency, but extra. It had 23 extra exams that you had to take. So that's why it took more time. So that's why it was 6 months. We got rid of those, so that's why it's been down to 4. And then, of course, there was it used to be 12 months because there was even more exams that you had to pass, not just the competency. And then you had to meet with you had to go in front of the CMECP board, and you had to satisfy members of the board with a specific question they would ask you, and you had to answer it to their satisfaction, not to my satisfaction, to their satisfaction. So we've evolved from that to an essay for the last step. We still have a proctored exam. So it's recorded. We don't care about your background noise, Tom. We just care that when you're being recorded, you have to be focused here. You can't stop and go do something else. Once you end the program, you have to be in it. We don't care. You know, if somebody comes up and you're in front of the camera and you're being recorded and you want to have a conversation with them, that's fine, but it's going to eat your time. The clock doesn't stop. So we don't care. When it's proctored, we just show the questions on the screen. You're going to write the answers on a blank piece of paper or a ruled paper. And then you'll have 10 minutes to send us that once the proctor exam. You take a picture of it with your phone and email it to us. That time stamps it, right? And so, again, you're going to see the questions on the screen. You're going to answer them on a blank piece of paper or on a ruled paper. Number it. It's 250 question basis. You get 3 hours to do it. And after it's done, you've got... And so if you have any guests or anybody wants to talk to you or whatever, that's fine as long as you stay on camera. And it's going to eat your time. We don't pause it, that type of thing. So again, we don't have a problem with it. Business is business. We get it. And as long as it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother us, that type of thing. Let's see here. Hope that answered that for you. What's up, High Voltage Hands? Driving to San Diego, 2.5-hour drive, one way. There you go. Listen to us on your drive. I love it. What's up, Manny? Manny in the house, sporting the green code nerd. Glad to have you here. John is in the house. John from Orlando, Florida. Glad to have you here. What's up, Beto B? It's in the house. Glad to have you here. Rob, good morning. All the code nerds out there giving a shout out. Charlie, what do you got here? Took my Nassau Mastered. Had one question wrong, but turns out the test was wrong. Didn't have the correct answer, so I wrote mine in. There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. You saw, good morning. I am doing good, my friend, from Columbia, Missouri. Glad to have you here. What's up, Brandon, down in Houston, Texas? Glad to have you, Brandon. Hopefully you're focusing, Brandon, on those calculations. What's up, Nepo? Glad to have you here. Frank says, Paul, do you have a grounding code book we can compare to the NEC code? I wouldn't say compare. We have the online grounding and bonding course, which is accessible from your phone. We don't have any written document. It's all on your phone. You can print pages, but it's all electronic. So that's our 2023 grounding and bonding course. I helped write the 2020 edition with Phil Simmons for Cengage. That is available. That's the grounding and bonding book. And Cengage puts out a book if you want the book. But our 2023 version is all electronic. It's all 100% online, available for your phone, laptop, or whatever it is. But that's a course that we offer. That type of thing. What's up, Santana? Glad to have you here. What's up, Joseph from Foggy, New Jersey? It is foggy here as well in Virginia. So again, it's very much the same. What's up, Jonathan? Good morning. Erie's in the house. Good morning. And I know Erie is a fast track student working in the program. So there we go. What's up, David from down in Florida? It's going to be a beautiful day in Florida. There you go. Let's see. Paul, looking forward to the show. I'm in the middle of your grounding and bonding course. Oh, okay, so you're in the middle of working that right now. That's cool. That is cool. David, welcome. Glad you're here. I did get your message, David, to call you back. Sorry, I was in a meeting and I had meetings the rest of the day. I will get a reach back out to you, my friend. I absolutely will. Angel, good morning. Thanks for coming. Alberto, good morning. Happy Friday to you as well. What's up, Alex? Good morning. Glad to have you here. Welcome to the show. As always, good to see you here. JPB, good morning. Glad to have you here. Taking time out of your day to join us. Love it. Appreciate you. What's up, Peter? Good morning. Happy Friday to you too, my friend. Make it a good day. Charlie says, what does the CMECP stand for? CMECP stands for Certified Master Electrical Code Professional. It's a certification program that we've offered through our corporation. Probably now it's coming up on 8 or 9 years, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever, something like that maybe. It's a program. It's not for everybody. It's only for master electricians or those that are equivalent. So if you're in a state that doesn't have a master, but they have a contractor's license because they don't have master, and that's equivalency. If you're a master, then you qualify. Now we also have an apprentice style program, whereas you can learn about the code to help you pass the master's exam, but it also helps jumpstart you into the CMECP program. The only caveat is at the end of a year, you have to have your master's. And then that jumps you to the proctored stage and then to the final. So you just get, as a journeyman, you get a year. Now, master's, it doesn't quite, you can't join the journeyman program to get longer time, right? Because the whole concept of the apprentice type of program in the CMECP is not only to teach you the code, is to give you enough time to prepare you for the master's exam. So that's what it does. And again, if you don't get your master's at the end of the year in that program, if you don't get your master's, you're out of the program. You can reapply once you become a master, but you can't go into the journeyman program again because that is a prerequisite. So it's certified, and you can look it up. CMECP is a trademark. It is trademarked. It is federally protected. I don't focus as much on it. We don't push it. People think, I have people that posted on other social medias and says, Paul's CMECP is just a money grab. You ask any of our CMECPs, I have not charged them a renewal since they became CMECPs. We've had tons of people that have gone through the program that can't make it. It was much harder when it was the 6 month and the year. Not that it's not easy now, because it's not. Somebody like Tom has advanced knowledge of the code. I can tell that when I look at his reports, right? So he's using this is to bolster his professional credibility. And again, the credentials, people ask me, is it accepted anywhere? It's accepted on how you promote it. And we encourage CMECPs to be good stewards of it and help promote it. So I shout out to all the CMECPs. You always should look for an opportunity to say, hey, if you're accepting credentials, you should think about accepting a CMECP credential. And this. You have to help build it as well. It's something we can't just snap and make people accept. But many people have accepted it for promotions, for job advancement, or bonuses. We get that all the time, emails from people on that for the CMECP program. And it's also just something for you to take your game to the next level. You already are a master in most cases when you get into the CMECP program. You're already a master. We're giving you credit for that. We're assuming you're a master at this point. So now all we're doing is solidifying that knowledge. That's all. And we're trying to make it rigid too, so that you can't negotiate or argue the questions. I know some people don't like that, but they're very specific in how the questions are asked. And so we want to make sure that we're just keeping you in tune, because the CMECP, we want you to be a certain way, that type of thing. So again, it's a little bit of method to the madness on how we do it. Seems pretty simple, but you just have to go through it, that type of thing. What's up, Van Man? Huh? Yep, you've taken exams where you qualify. Yeah, so we're very flexible because everything's recorded. So, and we're actually there. There's a proctor recording it, not sitting in a room and that yada, yada, yada. So we don't care about any stuff that comes in on the outside, as long as somebody's not there handing you answers. And we'll see that because it's constantly recorded. And we keep it on file so that if somebody ever questions your stages, we have that documentation for that type of thing. What's up, Tino? Good morning. What's up, Tara? Good morning. Welcome. Felix says it's Friday. That's what I'm talking about. What's up, Jonathan? Massachusetts is in the house.
Woo, 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 woo. Big dog.
There we go. Robert down in San Antonio. Glad to have you, Robert. Douglas. Wow, we have a house full. Edgar, y'all are sharing the love, letting people, sharing the shows, telling people about it, telling coworkers about it. I love it. What's up? Good morning from Charleston, South Carolina. Used to go there quite a bit. Let's see here. Van says, getting close to layoff time. We're putting on covers, thinking about going to Buffalo to work or stadium elsewhere. Okay. Yeah. Good thing about being an electrician is that you can take that skill. Now, again, I wish every state would have an open reciprocity. If you're a master or you're even a journeyman, you should be able to work freely in another state. I don't know. Be honest with you, it's just a money grab with the licensing situation. If you're licensed in one state, and we're talking electrons, and we're talking conductors, we're talking installation practice, we're talking all that stuff. Code is the code. That's why it's the National Electrical Code. So I really think that at the minimum, it would be nice if states would give temporary licenses like for 1 year. Whereas if you're from another state, you can go to that state, pay a fee, because that's all they want is the money. Pay the fee. You get to use your license in another state for a certain period of time, right? And then you can renew it or you move on. And it allows you to move around, that type of thing. I sure wish it would be that way. What's up, Anselmo? Glad to have you here. What's up, Greg? I see you in the house. Betty says it's certified journeyman electrical code professional. No, we only want masters. We feel the journeyman is always, even though masters are always learning, we feel journeymans are a distinct learning process. And it was kind of based on this kind of the same concept. If you've ever heard anything about the Masonics, kind of you have entered apprentice, you have the journeyman, and you have the master. Apprentices are the entered apprentice. Journeyman is learning the fellow craft and learning the process, and then of course then you got your master, that type of thing. Kind of the basic same concept. What's up, new place? Got you all hooked up over on Fast Tracks Tube. Just make sure you log in, that type of thing. What's up, Leroy? Glad to have you here. Welcome. What's up, Adrian? Good morning. Glad to have you here. All right, folks, let's get into today's lesson. And of course, if you're new popping in, let me know who you are, where you're from in here. Would love to talk about it. If you got anything you want to talk about, let me know. I did see your question. I did see this question. This is a bit long for coffee hour, but we cannot get into sizing your wireway. You don't give enough information to size your wireway. You don't give me the conductors. You don't give us enough information to be able to do that. You mentioned 24 inches, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're dealing in a bundling aspect of it or something like that. So you're not giving enough information. I encourage you to go to paulabernathy.com, and post a very detailed question and give all of the variables. One of your original questions over on Facebook was, what conductors can you mix in the same wireway or raceway? You can put feeders and you can put branch circuits in the same. There's also nothing in the NEC that says that I can't intermix secondary conductors with, as long as you follow the secondary conductor rules in 240.21C, as long as you're following those secondary conductor rules, you're protecting them and doing what you, about the length and all the other variables, then it's considered, those conductors are considered protected. And if that's the case, the only thing in the code is 230.7 that says service conductors can't be intermixed with other conductors like feeders and branch circuits. Service conductors could not be intermixed with other things like secondary conductors. Remember, a transformer is a separately derived system. Those conductors that come from the secondary side are not service conductors. Okay? They are just simply, in a sense, they're like feeders, right? But they're called secondary conductors. Okay? They can be in raceways with other conductors. Okay? So, I mean, you may have jurisdiction that limits that or has their own local rules or amendments or things like that, but I don't deal in amendments. I don't care about amendments. I only deal with the code, that type of thing. So, okay. And as far as bendings and things like that, you'll know that single insulated conductors do not have a minimum bending radius requirement. Cables do, but single insulated conductors do not, unless you get over 1,000 volts. Then they have some bending requirements. Anything less than that is going to be recommendations from a manufacturer when it comes to bending conductors and things like that. But it's very manufacturer specific. At Encore Wire Prysmian, we give a recommendation, but it's by no means part of a listing. It's just a recommendation. That's it. That's all it is. Okay, you know what I'm saying? All right. Okay, let's see here. Brandon says, also listening to part 4 of the Fire Pumps podcast. All right, you're getting it all. You're getting all that information in. There you go. Just watch the other than dwellings calculation on Fast Tracks Tube. Good lesson. Good. You're doing all the homework you need to do to be successful. That's what we're talking about. There you go. All right. So let's get into one of my favorite topics. Let's talking about it just happens to be grounding and bonding. And so we've worked our way up. We've been talking services, right? So now we've worked our way up, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the methods of bonding at service. Now, today's coffee hour is, again, it's like a 30,000-foot view of these requirements. Obviously, we have videos on Fast Tracks Tube. We have videos that we've done on specific detailed topics like this that get deep dive. I mean, it goes deeper into the subject. So by no means this coffee hour in the smaller time amount that we have that we can get as deep as I do in other videos. So check out Fast Tracks Tube. You will see it. Other videos on the bonding. We also have, what's up, Red Dog? Welcome.
Woo, woo, woo. Big dog.
We also have videos over on our YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We may get rid of some of the other social media stuff, but we will always keep our YouTube channel as well as our, obviously, Fast Tracks Tube. Not all the videos on Fast Tracks Tube will be available on YouTube, okay? And sometimes on YouTube, videos will disappear, move, go to private, things like that. And it typically is because we use YouTube as a storage repository in many cases. So we put videos there because storage is expensive for the volume and the size of the videos that we use, because everybody knows I'm long-winded. I can't do a little 2-minute video. So use that for storage. We may put it at private, and then we actually will play it on Fast Tracks Tube, okay? That type of thing, okay? So just keep in mind, okay? Let's see here. All right, so here we are. So methods of bonding at the service, okay? Connections using threaded couplings or threaded hubs on enclosures are permitted if made up wrench tight. Okay, so you see right here, you've got these hubs that come in the top, very typical to come in the top of a meter. Right? And you got threaded couplings that are connect things like rigid metal, intermediate metal, all those things. They're considered connections that are a little extra, right? They're assured, we used to call it. They have they are perfectly fine for service bonding. So if I'm bonding two pieces of rigid metal together, as I'm required to bond all that on the supply side, then I can use a threaded coupling. It's fine. Also, I could thread those down into a hub. The way this hub is designed on the top of the enclosure, then it is also considered bonded, okay, at the service. And we'll go look at the code so you can see each one of these, by the way. Next, it says listed devices. This is, again, service bonding. So this is supply side, okay, service bonding. It says listed devices such as bonding type lock nuts, okay? So this is a bonding lock nut. I can blow that up if you can see it. That's a bonding type lock nut with this set screw in that actually will dig down into the material, okay? Then you have what's called a bushings, right? So you've got bushings right here. And let's see here, you see the bushing right here. This happens to have a lug connected onto this bushing, okay? And then, or you can have bushings with an actual bonding jumper is also permitted to ensure electrical continuity at service equipment. Okay, so that is 250.92b4, and that kind of gives a list of the different things. Now, In there, you also have the ability to use things like bonding wedges. And bonding wedges have the ability to connect a lug onto them as well, depending on which manufacturer you're working with. We call bonding wedges, by the way, okay? We call bonding wedges goof wedges. And where I'm from, we called it goof wedges. And that was typically because it's designed so that, oof, you forgot to put it on and you got a standard lock nut and you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, a standard regular lock nut won't work in this scenario because it's service side, and it makes it specifically clear that you can't use a standard lock nut, okay? It may be mechanical, but we can't use it. And we're not talking about feeder side, we're talking supply side, service applications. So we can't use a standard lock nut. So you're thinking, well, crap, it's mechanically holds everything, but I still have to meet this bonding issue, right? So you can use one of these bonding wedges or goof rings, goof wedges, slide it around the conductors, put it on there, and then tighten down your standard lock nut, which will be your mechanical part. And now you have this wedge. So again, I typically would never use the wedge unless you screwed up. But nothing says you can't use it, that type of thing. And we'll go look at the list here just so you can kind of see the code. But the next would be making it very clear on, again, we're talking services. Standard lock nuts or bushings, like standard bushing, shall not be the sole means for bonding as required by 250.92b, but shall be permitted to be installed to make the mechanical connection. Okay, so holding the raceway there, that would be fine. But it is not something that you can use to meet the bond like we do typically on the feeder side or branch circuit side, right? We have a listed wiring method, listed connector, connects to the box, right? And we put a standard lock nut on it, cinch it down tight, and we're done, right? The bond is complete. Unless you're dealing with over 250 volts to ground. Then it's going to refer you back here to use one of these methods. So the easiest way to remember something like that, I tell people the easiest way to remember is when you're bonding at the service, raceways, things coming in, then you're going to follow 250.92 and you have all those rules that you have to follow, right? That's for what we call a more assured bonding method, okay? A little extra, a little something. When you're doing feeders and branch circuits, then you're like, okay, I can use standard lock nuts. I can have concentric and eccentric knockouts and be okay. But when I'm dealing with service applications, I got to do a little something extra. Now, if you're dealing with the situation where you have over 250 volts to ground, that's a 277 480 type system or a grounded 480 type system, then you look at it and go, okay, what do I got to do? That should send triggers. Well, then all you do is, in your mind, treat it like it was a service. Even though it's not, treat it like it is when it comes to the bonding, and then you jump your butt back to 250.92 and you start following that. The only thing you don't follow is 250.92b1 when it's over 250 volts to ground, because b1 talks about making a connection to the grounded conductor, and you can't do that, obviously, for load side applications, right? So, get me? All right, so I'm sure we'll look at all that, and I will go to the code because I like to go with, when I see references, I like to go to the code, especially when it comes to grounding and bonding, because there's so many confusing things when it comes to. What do we got? Van Man says, I had an aha moment yesterday regarding sizing a raceway. Divide table 5 into the table 4 using 40% for more than 2. Yep. So the interesting thing about doing raceway fill is that it's actually in our program. I don't remember, I think it's unit 5. I can't remember. I think it's unit 5 or unit 4, whatever it was. When it does the raceway, there's one of the questions in the commentary that people notoriously get wrong, and that is when it comes to pull boxes, right? They typically will get that wrong. The second thing that's surprising to me is any of the questions in our database that have to do with raceway fill. It still seems that quite a few people still struggle with raceway fill and how you use Chapter 9, Table 4 and Chapter 9, Table 5. And when 5A may come into play if you're dealing with compact conductors and things like that. So it's still, it may be only 1 or 2 questions on an exam, but this is an example where raceway fill is a real in the world scenario where you're out in the field, and you really need to make sure you understand how to do raceway fill. Obviously, we have videos over on Fast Tracks Tube that are just dedicated to raceway fill. So if you're want to get a little leg up, and we've done that here as well on Coffee Hour in the past, so you probably can go to the search feature on our YouTube page and type in raceway fill, but I'm sure you can also do that over on Fast Tracks Tube if you'd like to see something more dedicated to the topic, that type of thing. All right. So yeah, so what we're going to do is I just want to go look at the NEC for this real quick, because I don't want to jump off of it too quick, because again, we're doing a 50,000 foot view of this topic, and I want to make sure that I take you there. So let me get over there to 92. And again, we're talking services. So that's kind of the topic of our theme this past 8 parts. Okay, so that's why we're not so much talking about the applications where we'll be dealing with feeder applications, right? All right, so here's the service 259.2. Again, you see A, and this is basically telling you what has to be bonded, okay? Again, all raceways, cable trays, cable bus, gutters, everything. This is telling you everything that needs to be bonded when it comes to a service application, okay? And then it also says all enclosures that contain service conductors, okay? So it would be meter boxes, for example, like that. Any raceways that encase or enclose service conductors, anything that's got service conductors in it and it's metal, then it needs to be bonded, right? And so it's just telling you that the normal non-carrying metal parts of equipment indicated in the following shall be bonded together. Tie everything together so it's at the same potential. Okay, now you all know that since this is on the supply side, there's really no short circuit or ground fault protection involved. Okay, on any of these conductors, service conductors, they're just overload. That's why we do a load calculation. We make sure that the overcurrent protector device, that the overload portion is going to protect those service conductors from overload, not pulling too much current. But it's still not going to affect those conductors when it comes to short circuit and ground fault protection. Now, in all of the metal parts, the cabinets, if you have a wireway on the supply side, your meter enclosure, your raceways, all of those are going to have service conductors in it for the most part. And you want to make sure that they're all bonded because you want to reduce any touch potential. Remember, you're not going to clear any overcurrent protected device on that side typically. Okay, now you might get something that faults to it, then it's all bonded back, and you may get some reaction from an overcurrent device depending on the situation. But for the most part, you're not going to get anything on the supply side. So the best that we can do is tie all metal parts together so they're all at the same potential. So you're not removing anything. It's kind of like swimming pool applications, right? Where you have stray voltage, stray currents out in the ground around your pool, and you have that equipotential bonding grid, and you're not going to remove it from the earth. But we can reduce the effects of it by reducing the touch potential between the water and the surface area around it and all metal parts that are within 5 feet. If we bring them all to the same potential, then chances are we're not going to get differences of potential. And that is where shocking takes place, okay? If I touch here and it's at a different potential than here, then I'm going to feel that difference of potential. As a result, it's going to be a shock, right? And so kind of what we're doing at the service, because, and you may say, well, I don't like that I can take the grounded conductor and I can use that to bond all the metal parts on the supply side. You may not like that, but the National Electrical Code says it's okay. And I don't know what else you would do otherwise. Because again, we need to make sure that everything is at the same potential. But there is no overcurrent protection. We're not going to trip a breaker up on the pole that the electrician, go reset. They may have a fuse in line up there, but it's not something I'm going to mess with, right? So it's the best we can do in our situation. Can I use the grounded conductor to bond all those metal parts, the wireway on the supply side, a meter enclosure? Can I use the neutral conductor for that? Absolutely I can. And the code says that I can. Where does it say that? Real quickly, I'll get back to this one right here. But since I talk about things like that, I always want to show the reference because there's always somebody that says, that's bullshit, Paul. That's bullshit. No, it's right here. 250-142, right here. Okay, supply side equipment. It says a grounded conductor shall be permitted to be connected to non-current carrying metal parts of equipment, raceways, and other enclosures at any of the following locations: on the supply side or within the enclosure of the AC service disconnecting means. Okay, that or is important. On the supply side, all the way up and into the point of attachment. Number 2 says on the supply side or within the enclosure of the main disconnecting means for separate buildings as provided in 250.32B1. That's under the exception. If you meet the exception, you're probably not going to meet the exception. Okay, so again, that's exception is probably pre-1996. You're not going to meet it, but it's there. Since it's referenced in the code, you're going to have to mention it, okay, although it's probably not going to be used. And then you have on the supply side or within the enclosure of the main disconnecting means or overcurrent protection device of a separately derived system where permitted in 250.30A1. And of course, 250.30A1 is talking about the grounding electroconductor application when it comes to separately derived systems. Okay. Now, there you go. So down here, the load side, again, except as permitted in these exceptions and what it talked about, you are not going to have a load side connection for the metal parts to be contacted with the grounded conductor. Okay, and that would also be a direct violation of 250.24B. Okay, so we don't want to do that. That's why we separate grounds and neutrals in a remote distribution panel. We talked about that yesterday, so we're not gonna rehash that. So let's go back to, if you didn't see it, go back and watch that episode. All right, so let's get back to 250.92 real quick. Okay, so this tells you everything that's got to be bonded. Okay, what's up, Terrence? Glad to have you here. Now, down here is we talk about the methods to do that. Okay, the methods to do that. So this is important for me to read because, again, while I showed you earlier the different options, I do have to read this because I think it's important when you're doing service bonding applications. Number 1, it says, bonding jumpers meeting the requirements of this article shall be used around impaired connections, such as reducing washers or oversized concentric or eccentric or eccentric, however you want to say it, knockouts. So I tell students all the time, okay, just as an educator, anybody that's ever taken any of my live courses, back when I used to do a lot of teaching around the country, I tell people, if you're able to highlight in your book, and if you're not testing for an exam, you can do whatever you want in your book, highlight that one color because that's important. Anytime you have, okay, listen to me, anytime you have an impairment, if you look at a knockout and it's just beat to shit, or you have KOs in general, okay, and they're going to stay in place, and you're going to be putting a fitting on that, and you're dealing with service applications, you need a bonding jumper. Just get that in your mind. That's the first sentence out the gate. You're going to need a bonding jumper, okay? So people get this stuff all confused. They're like, you're going to need it. So it says right away in the code, right? If you look at it again, it says right there, it says bonding jumpers meeting the requirements of this article shall be used around impaired connections. Any of them. It's not just, reducing washers. It's not just concentric or eccentric or eccentric, however you want to say it, depending on where you're at in the country. It's anything that looks like an impairment. If it looks like it's beat to death, it looks like it's not going to make a good connection, anything, it can be an impairment. Okay, again, leaving that up to the AHJ to make the decision on that. So we're going to take the high road approach to this and say, if you're dealing with something like reducing washers or oversized concentric or eccentric KOs or eccentric, however you want to say it, you're dealing with those and you're in service applications, you're going, other than the hubs, which doesn't deal with those, right, in the top where you got that little hub, other than that, if you've got those type of KOs or impairments, you're going to need a bonding jumper. And whatever you use is going to have the ability to add a bonding jumper on it. That's easy, right? Fair? Everybody agree? Now, taking this sentence and keeping that as one color highlighted It allows you to go into the next thing that says standard lock nuts or bushings. Okay, just a standard screw-on bushing. Okay. It says, all right, hold on, Leroy. It says, so standard lock nuts, regardless of how you would configure them, by the way, it's not going to work, okay? Because it's telling you standard lock nuts, fine for mechanical, but not for a bond. Again, we're talking service. We're not talking feeder. We're not talking branch circuit. We're still in services, okay? It says standard lock nuts or bushings shall not be the only means for bonding required by this section, but shall be permitted to be installed to make a mechanical connection for the raceways. So a rigid metal conduit to an enclosure with 2 standard lock nuts, that's the mechanical portion, okay? Now, it says, now watch the caveat here, it says, electrical continuity at service equipment, service raceways, and service conductors enclosures shall be ensured, okay? I used to say to everybody, an assured bonding method means you know it's going to be done a little extra. But this says, shall be ensured by one or more of the following methods. And the reason that changed and added or more, because everybody thought that you pick one, you had to stick with it. You could have multiple options in your service layout to do this bonding. It's not just one, okay? Now, number one, okay? So again, so first things first, got to have a bonding jumper. Second, you cannot use standard lock nuts regardless of how you stack them. You cannot use that as the only means, okay? Now it says, number one, bonding equipment to the grounded service conductor by an applicable method in 250.8a. So you saw yesterday we talked about, so I can use the grounded conductor for services to bond, just like you saw in 250.142. I can do that as long as I do it with the proper method, lay-in lugs, proper lugs, bus bar, however I want to do it. I can do that on the supply side and bond all of that to that and be done. Okay, I can do that. Okay. Next, it says connections made up wrench tight. Okay, using threaded couplings, threaded entries, or listed threaded hubs on enclosures. Okay, so that's what we saw earlier. Okay, that's the hubs that are coming into the top, right? Or your threaded couplings between rigid raceways that you're connecting the different raceways together. Because again, if it goes all the way up to a masthead, then you have all these sections of raceways you have to connect together. So obviously the raceway is fine. Again, so then at the end of the day, you put the coupling on it. It's done. That type of thing. Be done, right? Okay. Next, and of course, those threaded hubs, okay? And also somebody asked about like a Myers hub. It depends on the hub. You have to make sure that that Myers hub is rated for the application, okay? So again, it's just a little bit of checking the manufacturer, looking at the listing, making sure it's been evaluated for its application. Then it may qualify, may be fine. Next, again, it's not going to be fine where you have impairments like eccentric or concentric, okay? Let's see here. Now, also, the one thing I want to point out as well while I'm here, because again, the subtle stuff that you learn on Coffee Hour. It says bonding jumpers meeting the requirements of this article shall be used around impaired connections such as yada, 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 right? If you have a situation where you don't have impairments at all, then you don't need the bonding jumper. You get me? If you don't have an impairment, you don't need the bonding jumper. But that still doesn't give you the ability to use a standard lock nut. It just says you don't need a bonding jumper. Does that make sense? Okay. And these little subtle things that people search forever to find, and this is why I love talking about grounding and bonding on Coffee Hour, because you'll learn these little tidbits of information, okay? The way it's structured, but you still can't use a standard lock nut, okay? Now it goes down here and it goes on. It says, look, threaded couplings and connectors, if made up tight for metal raceways and metal clad cable, okay? So again, you have threadless couplings, threadless connectors. I don't have any, actually, this is talking about couplings on boxes, making connections. Again, perfectly fine if you do not have a impairment. then they're listed for this application to come in. I was going to show you a picture. I mean, y'all all know what they look like, right? But I think we have a picture right here. So this is an example of a threadless connector, right there. Okay. I'm sure you all knew what that looked like, but it's always easier for me to show. All right. And then what other options do you have? Well, we have other listed devices. Okay. Again, if it's listed for an application, this is not an all-inclusive list, by the way. A manufacturer may put out a product and get it listed and evaluated and put it out there. But it says other listed devices such as, again, a lot of people mistake such as for these are the only options. No, it's talking about other listed devices, and it's going to give you kind of a such as well, some of these others. Well, you could have a bonding type lock nut. We have bushings that are designed for bonding, okay? Or you could have bushings with the bonding jumper. Now, the commentary is pretty good in link for this, okay? Notice it says right here, I'll just read it to you. Standard lock nuts, sealing lock nuts, and bonding bushings are not acceptable as the sole means for bonding a raceway or cable to an enclosure on the line side of the service disconnecting means. I'm agreeing with this, and I don't see how we can convey it any other way, okay? That is, you cannot use standard lock nuts, period, to meet the bonding. Mechanical, yes. Bonding, no. Okay. Next, it says for concentric, eccentric, or eccentrics, however you want to say it, or oversized KOs, electrical continuity must be ensured through a supply-side bonding jumper. Okay, that's that jumper we're talking about that connects the raceway to the enclosure through an improved grounding fitting. Where these KOs are in service enclosures, okay, they would impede the bonding connections, therefore requiring bonding jumpers in those situations. They would also be required when reducing washers are used to provide a suitable path for the high level of ground fault current that is available on the line side of the service disconnecting means. Okay. The exhibit below shows the difference between concentric and eccentric KOs and illustrates one method, only one method, it's not all the methods, on one method of applying bonding jumpers on these type of KOs. Okay, so you can see the image. So here, the raceways coming in, and we're assuming these are service raceways coming in. All right, and these are concentric or eccentric knockouts. And here they're using a bonding bushing with the lug on it, and they're installing a supply side bonding jumper. Okay, or in this case, we'll just call it a bonding jumper right here in order to make it very clear what's going on. That this raceway, through this fitting, is not relying on the standard lock nut. Okay, it is required to be connected to this enclosure a little more assured. Okay, and as the code says, ensure. I say assure. I like to use the word ensure because we're doing a little extra. Okay, and again, we saw it yesterday, and I want to. A lot of people still don't know the difference between concentric or eccentric or eccentric, however you want to say it. Is the concentric is they're all the same and they ring out. Okay, middle, then the next ring, and the next ring, and the next ring. Where eccentric are more like a half moons, and they have one which is offset, and then it has the different half rings like moons, that type of thing. I see for the most part the eccentric or eccentric, however you want to say it. I see those typically are what we would see on the boxes that are rated for over 250 volts, where you could leave the knockout sections in place and it still would be okay for over 250 volts to ground. That is very common when we're dealing with the over 250 volts to ground, and we have boxes that are made so that you can leave those KOs in place, okay? That type of thing. Now, one of the other things I'll mention, just because I always like to mention it to folks, is when you're doing reducing washers, whether you've knocked out a hole and it's too big and you got to put a reducing washer in there. Reducing washers are designed not to say it's a 2-inch hole and you knocked out and you had a 3/4 and you accidentally knocked a 1-inch out and it's a 2-inch, let's say, or 2.5. Reducing washers are not designed to take it and put it on where you have a 3/4 and you accidentally knocked a 1, but your overall KO is like 2 inches. You're supposed to knock out all of the KOs to use a reducing washer. Okay, that's how they're actually evaluated. So I see a lot of people who leave the rings in there and then they put a reducing washer on it, and only the reducing washer that's sized to fill the 1 inch down to the 3/4. That's not how they're designed. Either way, if you're using those in a service application for that scenario, you're going to need a bonding jumper. Okay, so that's an impairment. Okay, just so you know. All right, where are we at? Oh, while I was there, I might as well show you this while I was there. The picture. It's always good. You always want to finish it out. So this is an example here of the panel, and you see this coming in right here. So this just happens to be the raceway coming in, and it's coming in the top. This looks like, I guess it would be an EMT with a set screw. So it looks like EMT with a set screw fitting, right? Coming in. Service conductors coming in, okay? And there's other KOs up here. And again, can't use a standard lock nut for this little extra something something, right? So here they're choosing to use a bushing with a bonding screw lug on it, and they're putting in a supply side bonding jumper, okay? Now, what could they do? Well, they could have sized this raceway fully, knocked out all the impairments, right? And then they could use a bonding lock nut. That type of thing could have been their option. Okay, that's one of the options that we have. That type of thing. Let's see here. Just another example. Here's your main bonding jumper. These are 3 sets of 3 services coming in, right? Let's see here. Is still all service done. The power conductors aren't shown, just a neutral, by the way. Coming in, and you see that this enclosure here is bonded to the neutral here. Okay, so that's a supply side bonding jumper. This raceway right here, okay, is being bonded by this supply side bonding jumper. Okay, we'll assume there's some type of impairment here or whatnot. Okay, there you go. So this is just a good illustration that shows all the bonding scheme. And of course, down in the service equipment, here you have a supply side bonding jumper again for this raceway. And you notice that you're not doing both sides. Since we're doing this right here, this is for this raceway. We're doing it on this end. It doesn't have to be on both ends because this raceway is bonded, right here. And this raceway is bonded right here. Okay, if you have some type of impairment. So anyway, that's always a good. There is an example. I love these too. This is by Bridgeport. They were the first to come out with those breakaway bushings. I can tell you this is another example where somebody made a mistake or something and you're like, oh crap. Well, you can get these right here, and this so it can maybe save your day. Okay, I'm sure other manufacturers make them, but that would save your day. Okay, and also just while we're here, this is the other means. No, excuse me, right here. Other enclosures, 250.96. This is where you talk about all the other things that get done on the feeder side or get done with the branch circuits. Okay, again, standard lock nuts are fine, evaluated for that, whatever, yada, yada, yada. Make sure you remove any paints or anything that could inhibit the connection. Mini lock nuts that you get with the little teeth on it, they'll bite into it. That's fine. And of course, here's the one we were talking about, 250.97, when you're bonding for over 250 volts to ground. And the only significance that I'll tell you here, right? So this is basically feeder applications, right? This is for circuits that are not service related. So this is other than service. So you see right here, other than service. The only thing I'll tell you about this is that it's going to send you back to use the same methods we just talked about in 250.92b, except it's not going to let you do B1. Why? Because remember what B1 was? B1 was connecting to the grounded conductor, and we already know you can't do that on the load side, except we're permitted in 250.32b exceptions and all that kind of stuff, which is typically not going to come into play. So at the end of the day, all you do is remember all the type of things that we just talked about for service, because when you're over 250 volts to ground, just think it acts like a service. That's what you think. Now, there are a few little caveat things that we would talk about, okay, because there is an exception here, okay, because it's telling you to follow all of the rules in methods that are in 250.92b, right? But then it says exception. Exception says if oversized, concentric, or eccentric, or eccentric, however you want to say it, are not encountered. Means if you don't have any, or you remove them all, or there's none in place, okay? Or if the box or enclosure with concentric or eccentric or eccentric KOs are listed to provide the reliable bond, and that typically, folks, would be those boxes. They look a little heavier. They're usually like 11/16 boxes. They're a little heavier. And if you look at the KOs, and you guys that have done this, you know the difference between knocking out a concentric and then dealing with an eccentric and how you have to, it takes a lot to get it out. So it may be that that box is evaluated for an application of over 250 volts to ground. If that's the case, then those impairments can stay in place because they're listed for that. Don't assume it. You just need to look and make sure that you look at the listing of the box, whether it's on the box. It might say in the literature for it that it is okay for over 250 volts to ground. Manufacturers are getting better at posting these things. But typically, you're not going to see that in panels because typically the panel enclosures aren't rated that way, right? Now, if you punch your own holes in the larger equipment, when you're doing commercial, industrial, then you don't have impairments at all anyway, right? Still can't use standard lock nut, but you can when it comes to the service applications. But when it comes to the feeder and branch circuit applications, those type of usually punch your own hole. So you're not going to encounter concentric or eccentrics, right? So that's what this exception is dealing with. And remember, we're talking about not services. Now we're talking about load side applications other than services. If you don't encounter those, or the box is already evaluated for the over 250 volts to ground, the box itself, which you'll know that when you try to knock out some of those eccentric or eccentric KOs, you'll know that pretty quickly. It says the following methods shall be permitted. Okay, so assuming we had no impairments or the box is evaluated for the use at over 250 volts to ground, even with the KOs in place, then you can use a threadless coupling and connector for cables with metal sheath. So it's like MC cables, AC cables, things like that. Then you've got, here you go. Here's the one that somebody was asking. You have 2 lock nuts on rigid metal or intermediate metal on one inside and one outside of the box. Okay. Again, that's okay for over 250 volts to ground on rigid and intermediate. Okay. That's perfectly considered fine. Again, if you don't encounter any of these impairments, that's important. This is only applicable if you are applying this exception. Okay. If the exception is not there, then you got to go back to 250.92b and follow the rules. And again, lock nuts can't be the only means to do this. Okay. Should be pretty, it should start clicking in your mind now, all these applications. Number 3, fittings with shoulders, like EMT, things like that. Fittings with shoulders that seat tightly against the box or cabinet, such as, again, electrical metallic tubing connectors, flexible metal conduit connectors, and cable connectors, with one lock nut on the inside of boxes with cabinets. So that's just your normal listed fitting, and it sits tight. But at the end of the day, we have what we always say, because again, you have to leave the door open for manufacturers who get their evaluations, is this one. Number 4, listed fittings. Okay. Again, that's a catch-all, because if it's evaluated for use, then it ought to be acceptable. Now, this is enhanced content again, and it just gives you some information. For those that did not know, it says the UL guide information indicates that concentric and eccentric knockouts of all metal outlet boxes evaluated in accordance with UL 514A, that is for metal outlet boxes, are suitable for bonding without the use of an additional bonding equipment, such as a bond-type lock nut or bonding bushing. Okay? The guide information further indicates that metal outlet boxes may be marked to indicate this condition of use. Okay? So they may mark the additional information on it, but here it's saying that UL 514A says that that if you're dealing with concentric or eccentric knockouts on metal outlet boxes, okay, metal outlet boxes that are designed in accordance with UL 514A, which is the manufacturers follow in the making, they say that they're suitable for bonding without the use of any additional bonding equipment. Like you don't need bonding type lock nuts. You can use a standard lock nut for this application. All right. Just remember though, this is UL information. Okay. So it's extra information. It's in the commentary. You can get UL 514A and read over it. But most of the manufacturers will tell you, because of confusion, they will stamp or put it in the box or on the box container. Will let you know if there's any enhanced ratings for that. I can't say they all will, but most of the major manufacturers will do that. Okay. Now, right here, it says this is bonding around pre-punched concentric or eccentric knockouts is not required if the enclosure containing the knockouts is listed as suitable for bonding. So again, this is something that manufacturers will typically post on there if they're buying. I mean, they pay the extra money for the evaluation, right? And if it has the eccentric KOs on it, and it usually means they have a little more robust nature to it, then it will be done. He said, Rob says, Ryan Jackson has a great chart that will walk you through when you need the bonding jumper to look at. Awesome. Ryan does a great job. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's get back to the thing. All right. So there you go. So that was the bonding at the service. We kind of covered all that. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about grounding electrode system. Okay. All grounding electrodes are described in 250, 52A1 through A7 that are present at a building or structure served. They all must be bonded together to form the grounding electrode system. We refer to that as the GES, if you've ever heard anybody talk about acronyms for that. It's a grounding electrode system. Now, you may have a house that only has ground rods. Okay, well, that's it. That's your grounding electrode system. And you make your connections with the grounding electrode conductor up to your service equipment, and so that it makes connection to the grounded conductor. It can be in the service equipment, and be honest with you, it can also be anywhere on the supply side up to and including the point of attachment location. Okay, as long nobody does it there, they typically will do this in the equipment, service equipment, but you could do that. All right, so this grounding electrode system, we have different types. Now, there is certain ones that are that may be there is part of construction. Right? So concrete encased electrodes may or may not be there, depending on whether or not they have a vapor barrier down. And it's the rebar, 20 feet of rebar is not in contact with the earth. Well, then it's not really a concrete encased electrode. But you may have a water pipe ground that's required to be supplemented. You may have a concrete encased electrode. You may have a ground ring. You may have a plate. Or might have a pipe version. So you have different options. Certain ones are there as part of construction. Concrete encased electrode may be there part of construction. The metal water pipe ground, which I rarely ever see anymore, it may be there, and it's got to qualify. Means that in 250.52A1, it's got to be 10 foot in contact with the earth to qualify. It's not always the case. We're using plastic more and more today. So, but if it was there, then I have to supplement it. But the point is, if I have multiple grounding electrodes there, I have to tie them all together to act as one. Now that's in 250.50 that says that we have to do all that. Okay, that does not mean that if I have a concrete encased electrode there, do I have to supplement that? Absolutely not. And any AHJ that would make you supplement a concrete encased electrode doesn't really know how electrodes work. They don't. There's only two types of electrodes that have to be supplemented. Well, I should say four type. But they are basically a water pipe electrode has to be supplemented, types of electrodes. And then a single ground rod, or pipe or plate has to be supplemented if it's the only one, okay, if you can't meet 25 ohms or less. So they require to be supplemented, okay? So, but a ground ring, not required to be supplemented. In-ground steel, if you have that, not required to be supplemented, right? So it's just the water pipe and rod pipe or plates that required to be supplemented unless they meet 25 ohms or less. Remember, the 25 ohm rule only comes into play with rod pipes and plates, not any of the other electrodes, by the way, okay? All right, it's a lot of info. Hopefully you absorbed that. So the grounding electrode types covered, number one is 250.52.1. Oops, I'll get you back to the lesson. Right here is metal underground water pipe. Next to is be metal in-ground support structures. Okay, that is like I-beams that are encased in concrete in the earth or driven in direct contact with the earth. Okay, those, if you have that 10 feet or more, then that's going to be considered an electrode. And if you happen to have both of those by chance due to the nature of construction, then if that's how they constructed the building, then you got to tie them together. Okay, now, can the in-ground support structure supplement the water pipe? Absolutely. It's already in place. Don't have to do anything else. Let's see here. Next will be concrete encased electrode. That is commonly referred to as a Ufer ground, named after a man named Herb Ufer. He was not the only one. He's the one who did a majority of the testing, but also a bunch of other people up and down the West Coast did some additional testing as well in order to formulate, and we just call it a Ufer after Herb Ufer, but there was quite a few people that were involved in the development of that type of electrode. Pound for pound, is probably the best electrode out there because of the amount of surface area in contact with the concrete, which is in contact with the earth. The concrete absorbs moisture, so it makes a good connection to the earth for dissipation of lightning and surge and transients. One thing to remember is that it's not the rebar or a 4-gauge copper, 20 feet of it. It's not that alone. It's in conjunction with the concrete installed in the footer, in direct contact with the earth. All those elements have to be together. So it's not just about rebar, okay? It's not about the half-inch steel rebar. It's not just about a 4-bare copper that could be used. It's about how they work as a system, okay? Next is ground ring. I see a lot of ground rings on towers. Communication towers, things like that. Again, a ring only has to encircle it, but it also does has a lot of surface area. Okay. Next is rod and pipes. Again, ground rods and pipes, 3/4 inch driven pipe. Okay. Very rarely have ever seen that, but it is doable, and they make a fitting that screws onto the end of it that actually can have the connector put onto it. I found that people that use that when they're doing the drive, or they're driving, or they're putting the pipe in, they have to be very careful because you screw up the threads on it, and then you've got issues for any fitting that may be on the end. But at the end of the day, I don't recall in my career pushing over 40 years never seen anybody use a pipe electrode like that. Now, water pipe, yeah, but not a pipe electrode. Number 6, other listed electrodes. You could have, there's some chemical versions that you put in the ground and you add chemicals to it, and it kind of works, and you have to maintain those, and you add it. It can be vertical, it can be vertical and horizontal. That is something that a manufacturer may make something and have it evaluated. It doesn't meet the nice little list here, but if they get it evaluated and it works for that, then you can use it. Just look for the listing. Next, plate electrodes. Again, a plate sounds like just like it is. Typically, minimum of 1 foot by 1 foot, so that you have 1 foot, 2 foot surface area. It's 1 foot on each side in contact with the earth. And I've seen a few plates installed in my time. There you go. And it is other local metal underground systems or structures. Very rarely ever see the local metal stuff. That's other stuff that's already on site, tanks and things like that, metal water tanks. You have to work with your AHJ on that, and that's a big timing thing because they want to see that connection. If it's existing or something's there, then it's kind of hard to verify, but it is there as one of the options. So when we talk about a metal water piping electrode, the metal water pipe must be in direct contact with the earth for a minimum of 10 feet, including any metal well casing effectively bonded to the pipe. and electrically continuous or made so by bonding jumpers around any insulating joints or insulated pipe to the points of connection of the grounding electrode conductor and the bonding jumpers or jumpers. So this is example. I don't know if you can see it. So this is an example where it has to be made continuous. Okay, so you have a water meter out there. It is in this 10-foot run that you have to make this all act as one. So it has to be as continuous. And down here, oops, I don't know here. Let's see if I can do this better. That's a little better. So here you see 10 feet in contact with the earth. Okay. And then once it comes in, you have the general rule is that you connect your grounding electrode conductor within the 5 feet of point of entry. You heard me talk about that yesterday. That actually came in 1993 with a distance wise. Now there is an exception to this, which it can be further than 5 feet, but it has to be able to see that entire run. Okay, so that it's like in a chase inside of a wall where you have access and you can actually see it. Then there is an allowance to be further than 5 feet, but the general rule is you're going to make that connection within 5 feet of the point of entry. The moment that this pipe goes off into the wall or somewhere that you can't observe it, then you could not use that exception. Okay, so this typically is going to be made within 5 feet of point of entry. Okay, so that is considered a connection point right there. All right, and so let's see here. So if the metal water pipe system that is electrically continuous with a metal underground water pipe electrode and is located not more than 5 feet from the point of entrance into the building shall be permitted to extend the connection to the electrode. Say this 5 feet, right, is allowed to extend the connection. So allowed you to make the connections here to this electrode right here. Interior metal water piping located more than 5 feet from the point of entry to the building shall not be used as a conductor, except under the exception. Okay. Rod pipes and plates. Right. Again, a electrode's upper end must be flush with or below ground level unless the above ground end and the grounding electroconductor attachments are adequately protected against physical damage as specified in 250.10. And that makes a reference for the protection, and it's stating these instructions in 250.53A4. I routinely see people leave their ground rods sticking up. First thing is, the code requires that it's 8-foot driven. Now, there is other allowances for doing it at an angle or laying it in a trench, but the first general rule is that it has to be driven if you're going to use ground rods. Not where you're backfilling and you just stick it. I've seen people do this on a building or a dwelling, whereas they're backfilling and they have a gap there and they just go and stick it there and they leave it there so that when the person pushes the backfill against the building, that's not driven. Okay? Code says that it has to be driven. And it's all about the surface area, the surface tension by driving it down and making that lack of a better term, suction that takes place with that electrode into the earth. Whereas if you backfill around it, you could have voids, okay? And so again, a ground rod is, the chances of you getting 25 ohms or less for a single ground rod anywhere in the country is slim. Now you may, I'm not gonna say never, but it's usually slim. There was a video that I think Mike did, wow, many years ago, and it was down in Florida, and with the sandy soil and things like that. I think that in order to get below 25 ohms, they had to drive, God, it was over 100 feet, and nobody wants to do that in order to, I mean, what's the point? If you have to do that to get below 25 ohms, then shit, the code just says you can drive a second one and be done with it. Nobody cares about the 25 ohms. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know why you would do that. He did it for an experiment to show you that it's difficult to reach it. You do not measure 25 ohms or less. You do not measure that with a standard ohm meter. It's a ground resistance meter or a 3-point or 4-point fall of potential meter is used for that. It's not your standard ohm meter. So don't go out thinking you can stick one lead in the earth and one. It's not how it works. Okay. So make sure you just don't do that. Most people are not going to spend the money for those unless you're doing like towers, or whereas it's beneficial for you because the specifications demand that you have a certain ground resistance. So then they might want you to put ground rods in a triad, and then they might want you to put a plate, but then they want you to measure it because they want you to get to a certain level. Okay. At the end of the day, the code says that what? It says if it's not 25 rod, pipe, or plate, if it's not 25 ohms or less, then I add an additional supplemental electrode, and then I can stop. I don't have to keep adding until I get to 25 ohms or less. That rule is only for me to use one, that type of thing. Okay? But that is your electrode. If I add another electrode, then I am supplementing my electrode with an additional electrode. Once everything's connected together, it acts as one. Okay? One grounding electrode system. Okay? All right, so you're driving that ground rod. If you're going to leave any sticking up, I mean, hell, I'll respect it. Maybe you're using an 8-foot ground rod, and you are having, maybe using a 10-foot ground rod, and you drove 8 feet into the earth, and you've got some sticking up. Well, you got to protect it from damage. You got to protect the fitting. You got to protect it from impalement, all that kind of good stuff. But also, I routinely, when we were overseeing inspections, and I told you folks a story one time about an installer who cut their ground rods, and I caught him in it by simply pulling on the ground rod. It's one of those things where we need to make sure that we're not leaving that connection, whether it's an acorn clamp or whatnot, above grade, because it can easily be damaged, hit with lawnmowers and stuff like that, and effectively lose your grounding electrode system. Okay. And so, again, people say, well, we've had houses that have been around for 100 years that don't have any grounding electrode system. Paul, it works fine. It works fine until it doesn't, okay? It works fine until there's some kind of surge, there's some kind of lightning strike, there's some kind of transient that gets imposed onto during a storm where high power lines may drop on low power lines and we need to dissipate it to the earth, things like that. We're obviously not establishing a grounding electrode system to clear any overcurrent device. That's not why we do it, okay? It's to stabilize the voltage. It's to make that connection to earth for high voltage lines, potentially dropping and sending current down on low voltage lines. It is, again, for lightning strikes into the system. It's intended to go to the earth. That's where we want to take it. So that's why we make that connection. You could have a situation where your home never has a grounding electrode system and everything's going to run. You may have some voltage stabilization issues, but it typically will be fine because you have that grounded conductor, which back at the transformer is connected to earth. So things work, right? But at the end of the day, you just never been in a situation where you've tested the system. You get what I'm saying? So it works fine. Let's see here. David, got a question. Does it matter if the UFR is on the other side of the building than the service running the G across the building? No, it doesn't, except for we try to steer people in the code to keep that distance as short as possible. Now, the code does have a provision, as you know, David, where I can use the building structural steel as a jumper or to extend the grounding electrode conductor, okay? That type of thing. To extend it. So I could have the building steel and I have one on one side of the building connect to that building steel. We're not talking about just the metal studs, okay? Building structural steel, right? And being able to use that under, I believe 250.68 has different allowances for those things like that, okay? But as far as the extension, and again, I can show that if we go to the code, because I'm already here anyway. There isn't really a tongue-in-cheek distance that we talk about, but let's see here. Let me go on and cheat here and jump up so I don't have to do this here. Here we go. Let's see here. Let's see. So the grounding electrode connections. So you do see some allowances here. I'm sure you're familiar with these when it comes to the grounding electrode conductor connections. Here's the one for it's the metal structural framing of a building shall be permitted to be used as a conductor to interconnect electrodes as part of the grounding electrode system or as a grounding electrode conductor. Of course, you then have all these caveats that you have to meet, right? But as far as the distance it goes, okay, it's one of those things. Well, is exception? Let's see here. Did that exception go into the 2023? I don't know. I don't see this as. No, I think that was there. I can show you. Let's go back to the 2020. Let's go to the 2020 look. I can show you. That's nothing that I'm aware of that changes that. So let's see. In the 2020, let's go down to same thing right here. So here's the 2020. Okay, connecting of electrodes. Let's see here. Here is the grounding electroconductor path, and there is the metal structural steel. So they did have a change here, making sure that when you make the connection to the structural steel and how it connects to a UFO, for example, it gave you some requirements here. But other than that, now you do have an allowance to use that structural steel in order to extend things out, that type of thing. Now, they have some changes down here for when you can and can't use the rebar, that type of thing, to extend anything, but not when it comes to the structural metal. You cannot, by the way, for folks that are watching, you cannot use the rebar in your concrete encased electrode. If you have that, you cannot use it as your path all the way back. You can't use the rebar. I mean, you can use it as an electrode, but you can't use it as an extension to connect other electrodes together. Can't do that type of scenario. Might be what you're talking about. Let's see here. Let me get back to the 2023 in case we need to go back there. All right, so let me get back to here. So, all right, so let's get back to these ground rods. Let's see here. Where rock bottom is encountered, okay, so you're required to drive, okay? And if you hit rock bottom, and I'll show you where it says that real quick, because again, I do time to time have people that question that when it comes to where it says about driving it. They say, Paul, that's not true. I can lay it. I can put it into voids and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, well, here's what it says. All right. So here now below. Okay. And you have all these requirements. So here's a ground rod. So here's 4. Okay. It says the electrode shall be installed. Oh, I'm not sharing it. Make sure I share it. It says here, rods, plates right here. It says, the electrode shall be installed such that at least 8 feet in length is in contact with the soil. Okay, so we have the 8-foot requirement. It says, it shall be driven to a depth of not less than 8 feet first. So driven, not placed in place, driven, okay, to a depth of not less than 8 feet. Okay, then it says, except that where rock bottom is encountered, it says, the electrode shall be driven again at an oblique angle not to exceed 45 degrees. Okay? And when you're driving at 45, if where rock bottom is encountered at an angle up to 45, then only then can the electrode be permitted to be buried in a trench that is at least 30 inches deep. Okay? So it's a sequence. And I have a lot of people that get confused about that, right? Is that you've got to drive it. You can't go straight to laying it in a trench. It's got to be driven. If you hit rock, then you can do it up to a 45. If you hit rock again, then you're allowed at that point to put it in a trench at 30 inches deep. You can put it in that trench, okay? Oh, another little tip that people ask me about all the time. They go, well, Paul, if I end up getting to the trench part, when I'm laying him in the trench, can I just lay the 2 ground rods side by side? And the answer to that is no. They still have to meet the separation requirement. They have to be at least 6 feet apart. So that's going to make for a pretty damn stouty trench, by the way. Right? Because you've got an 8-foot rod, and then they have to be 6 feet apart. So you'll have the 8 foot, and you'll have 6 foot. So that's a pretty good trench. So keep that in mind. But that does not mean that when I'm doing a house, let's say, and I have the backfill and it's open and I haven't pushed the dirt back yet, then I'm like, oh, well, shit, I'm just going to I'm just going to lay it in the trench right there and they'll backfill over it and we'll be good. No, that's not how it works, folks. Not how it works. All right, so that's what example here. You can just kind of see that right there is the first step. Hit rock. You're able to do this at 45, okay? You hit rock, then I am allowed to go down 2.5 feet or 30 inches, okay? Makes sense? All right. If multiple rods, pipe, or plate electrodes are installed to meet the requirements of 250.53, right, then they shall not be less than 6 feet apart. So just to kind of show you right here, 6 feet apart. Okay? And it's all about the sphere of influence. Putting them too close together can cancel out the effectiveness of these electrodes. Many people say, and engineers will say, that you separate them the same as their length is the most efficient. That's not what the code says. So if you want to do that and you go over and above, or you want to listen to the engineers give you that advice, then you do you. But the NEC is a minimum safety standard. People say, I go above it all the time, right? And I'm like, okay, you do that if you want. But again, the code says that it only has to be 6, okay? And again, when it comes to the plates, then, for example, the plate, and remember it says it's 2 feet. I'll show you that on the plate requirement. Let's go to the NEC real quick. This is the burial. So this is the depth of the plate. So that's 30 inches as well. But if I was talking about the plate dimensions, because I always like to talk about this to people, if we go up here to the plate, right here. So here's the plate. So this is the electrode, okay? This is the electrode. It says each plate electrode shall expose not less than 2 feet of surface to exterior soil. Now, there is a lot of people around the country who'll say that means that that plate needs to be 2 feet. It's in order. No. You can use both sides of the plate. So effectively, it's a 1 foot by 1 foot plate because that's a foot on one side and a foot on the other side. It's in contact with the earth, okay? And that's adequate. So it's a 1 by 1 foot plate. It's going to be 2.5 feet down or 30 inches down, that type of thing. David, what is this? You're educating another engineer that is using 250.122 for the grounding on a secondary. Yeah, he doesn't understand how that works. And you're right, 250.30 is going to ultimately send you to, based on the size of the conductors. There is no overcurrent protection at those secondary protection. Even though we have secondary conductor length rules, and their lengths can be based in limiting the size of the primary protection, those secondary conductors, again, they derive from the secondary. They can't use 250.122 directly because there is no overcurrent protection for utilizing that, okay? And so at the end of the day, the overcurrent protection typically on the primary side is 1, probably to protect the transformer, and 2, it vicariously will probably protect the primary conductors. And if you do secondary conductor rules in 250.20, 250.21, 240.21, excuse me, B for feeders or C for secondary conductors, you've got rules you have to follow. Okay, so again, it shouldn't be that hard to educate them if you go back and look at 250.30 and what it states, that kind of thing. So good luck with that, David. David, again, is a CMECP, went through our program, did amazing, and he works with other people to help teach them and get engineers in line and things like that. So that's exactly what I would expect a CMECP to do, to step up and do those type of things. So good job, David. All right. Grounding electrode conductors. The grounding electrode conductor must be made of copper, aluminum, skipping that product, or the items as permitted in 250.68C. Okay, and 250.68C, by the way, also allowed, let's see here, I'll go there so you can see it. That was where, when it says the other ones in 68C, that's where we saw it's talking about where you can utilize metal water piping system in the building, that type of thing, or the metal frame of a building, that type of thing. So those would be examples of the other items that are permitted, right? That type of thing. That's what it's talking about. It says the material selected shall be resistant to any corrosive condition existing at the installation or shall be protected against corrosion. Right? Now, many people don't realize that you can use aluminum as a grounding electrode conductor with some limitations. Obviously, outside, it can't make that connection within 18 inches of the earth, okay? But it can do it inside of an enclosure that's rated for exterior use that may have those connections less than 18 inches. If that enclosure is evaluated for that condition of use, means like a NEMA 3R or something like that. But other than that, typically, you're not going to make an aluminum connection to electrode within 18 inches of the earth. Of course, also remember dissimilar metals, making aluminum to copper connections is a no-no, but usually the fitting will be listed as such if it allows for the multiple type of conductive material. Most of the time we're dealing with copper. Believe it or not, aluminum in general is corrosive resistant. It creates a patina on it that is an oxide layer, aluminum oxide. It is a pretty tough. It is not good for termination. Scrape it off. But when it gets this protective layer on the aluminum in general, then it helps reduce further corrosion. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is obviously corrosion. But I'll have you know that copper corrodes as well, and we've been dumping copper in the earth forever. But I'm sure you've seen the rooftops of copper that turn green with a patina, all those type of things. It's not going to affect its usability. The key thing is the terminations. That's why we have to torque things right. That's why we have to use listed terminations. In grounding and bonding, use a method in 250.8 to make sure that they're reliable and that they're done right, that type of thing, okay? All right. Let's see here. Oh, as far as conductors too, I get this question a lot. Say, Paul, does it have to be bare? There's certain areas in the code, for example, with copper, where things are required to be solid or insulated, and they can't be stranded. And there are other areas, for example, where it's like, you know what? Statue of Liberty has patina all over. That's why it's a green in color, but it's copper. And that patina adds to protection of the actual copper, that type of thing. Not good for connections, but good overall, doesn't have a detrimental effect on it. Now, with that said, a lot of people talk about, they ask me things about, well, what about its current carrying ability? What about skin effect? What about how the electrons flow? And I remind people that in DC systems, the electrons will flow through the majority of the conductive material, all the way even down to the core. When it comes to AC systems, it typically flows on the outer perimeter. It does dig into the actual surface area of the conductor, but it doesn't just dance on the outer surface. Until your frequencies start getting really higher, not something that we deal with 60 hertz. We start getting to very higher frequency applications, then it becomes more of an issue, and that's why you get things like tinned copper and other types of things where you have a very high frequency. Then the current will travel on the outer perimeter and more on the surface area, and it may have an effect on it. But what we deal with, building wire and things like that, not going to affect, and it actually can have a protective elemental role to protecting that conductor. Okay, now that does not mean that if I take an aluminum conductor in a raceway, stick it outside, damage the insulation, put it in a raceway underground, which we know is a wet location, and think that I'm not going to have any possible issues because of what's in the water, what gets in through the damaged insulation to the aluminum. You can have an electrolysis take place, and you end up having the breakdown of the aluminum much more rapid because you have current flow. Remember, typically on the grounding electrode systems, typically on those things, they are not normally current carrying products. All right, now, does some current potentially, depending on how somebody wires their system, whether it's incorrectly done, you could have certain elements of current traveling on it, and it can rapidly reduce the system's effectiveness. But in general, we only worry about when we put, that's why you can't take, for example, conductors and throw them into the earth. There have to be something that's evaluated. So that's why you have USE-2, okay? Underground surface entrance to single insulated conductors. They have thicker insulation. They're evaluated under UL 854. They're designed for direct burial. That's why they have a direct burial marking on it. They have thicker sheathing. That's why you can't take XHHW or THHN, THWN-2. You can't throw those in a trench. They have to be in a raceway. Even though we know that raceway underground is going to be flooded, okay, it'll ebb and flow, right? A little Masonic reference there. Be a little ebb and flow. But at the end of the day, it's in a raceway where it's supposed to be. And as long as it's installed without any damage to the insulation, it'll be fine. All right? But you can't direct bury it. Direct burial is going to have another evaluation. It's going to have a little higher crush and impact evaluation. It's going to be thicker insulation for that application, and it's going to be marked on it for that type of application. Okay? Can I use aluminum USC-2 and dump it in the ground? Absolutely, I can. It's evaluated for it. I thought you couldn't have aluminum. That's the termination where it's exposing the aluminum within 18 inches of the earth. Not an insulated conductor that is listed for direct burial. If it's aluminum, throw it in the earth. That's what URD does. That's what UDC is, which is essentially the same product. Happens all the time, okay? By the way, don't be afraid to reach out to your manufacturer, wire and cable manufacturer, whoever you use. Hopefully you use Encore Wire and Prismium. But whoever you use, Southwire makes a great product. Make sure that you utilize the manufacturers for all of your questions. Because believe it or not, you'd be surprised at the amount of knowledge that they can help you with. It doesn't make you any less of a man to not read instructions or reach out to people for help, okay? So, all right, so aluminum or this other product I won't talk about, external to buildings or equipment enclosures shall not be terminated within 18 inches of the earth. Terminations made within outdoor enclosures that are listed and identified for the environment, like I just said a minute ago, they are permitted to have those terminations within 18 inches of the bottom of the enclosure. And that is very common for things like transformers that are outside that actually will have their terminations down low. But the enclosure is related. The enclosure is evaluated for the environment to where it is. Okay, there you go. Oh, David says another engineer insists on using aluminum conductors to ground rods. And how does he get around the termination within 18 inches of the earth? Because the ground rod is required to be driven flush. So that's an interesting one there, David. All right. So grounding electroconductor sizing. Okay. So a 4 AWG copper or 2 aluminum or this other conductor I won't talk about. Grounding electroconductor is required if the service inch conductors are 2/0 or 3/0 in table 250.66. Okay. So we're just talking in general, all of these different. So let's just talk about this and show you what we're talking about, because I do want to show you something about 250.66. Okay. That's the clarity you're asking? Yeah, well, let me know how that works out, what his answer is, because he's an engineer, right? But I will say this in all fairness to engineering. I'm with the engineering school. They do not teach code. And maybe today it was an elective back then. They do not teach code. I think it should be a prerequisite. Hey, all of you engineering schools out there, I got a program that you should be using to teach all your engineers grounding the National Electrical Code. Call me. I'll work with you. I'll even create a special program just for you in your school. All right. So anyway, so this is what we're talking about. So you have all these different options here. Notice how here they have a water pipe ground, and notice that 5-foot point of entry, okay, being utilized to interconnect. Okay. All right. So let me go back here. All right. So it says, and I will go look at the table, by the way. Well, let's do that first. Let's go look at the table first, because I do want to show this table. All right, so we're going to look at this table, and I'll give you some insight into this table that may help you. Okay, so this is a table you all should be committing to memory. Okay, you have 3 tables that are in 250 that you should just flat out commit to memory. The first one is 250.66. That's for sizing the grounding electrode conductors. Okay, the next one is 250.122. That is for sizing equipment grounding conductors. Should commit to memory. Anytime there's an overcurrent protected device that we have to clear, and there's a safety conductor run with it, like an equipment ground, we have to clear that overcurrent protected device. Equipment bonding jumpers essentially sized the same way. You just do those in 250. Those going to be done as well. You're going to end up being at 250.102D, which ultimately sends you to 250.122 for those load side equipment bonding jumpers as well. All of those things are sized based on the overcurrent protected device. And then lastly, you need to get familiar with 250.102C, which talks about minimum sizing for supply side bonding jumpers, grounded conductors, system bonding jumpers, those type of things. Be familiar with those three tables. We're going to talk about 250.66 here. And this says sizing of the grounding electrode conductor and bonding jumper. Okay, remember what we talked about? And this is where people say, well, wait a minute, what if I have two ground rods? Well, to the first one is the grounding electrode conductor, to the other one is the bonding jumper, connecting the two electrodes together. Okay, that's just one example. It says, so sizing of the grounding electrode conductor and bonding jumpers for connection of grounding electrodes shall not be smaller than given in table 250.66. Okay, so this is the table. Then you see an except. It says except as permitted in 250.66A through C. So this is what I tell people. The general rule on an exam, if you're sizing the grounding electrode conductor, and this is going to be based on the conductors that are supplying the system. If you're going to be sizing the grounding electrode conductor, if it's not a rod piper plate, if it's not a U for ground, and it's not a ground ring, then you're always going to go to this table. Always. That's your first step. Okay? And so if it does have to do with rod piper plate, if it does have to do with a U for ground or a concrete encased electrode, or if your grounding electrode system is a ground ring, then you have the permitted use of 250.66 A, B, and C. Okay, so the default is the table, but you get permission to use A, B, or C. Now, there are caveats with A, B, and C. Okay, we used to call that the sole electrode. Okay, what it meant was if you're going from the panel to that electrode, as long as you're not going from that electrode to another electrode that requires a larger grounding electrode conductor than what you would have been required to that ground rod, for example, then that would not be the sole connector, and you couldn't do that. Okay, then you couldn't follow 250.66A, right? So if it goes from the panel to the ground rod and just goes to another ground rod, which is the bonding jumper over to it, then you can use 250.66A, and it says that it never has to be larger than a 6 copper or 4 aluminum. But you still have the issue of connection to the ground rod with the aluminum because it can't be done within 18 inches of the earth. Okay, but still could use aluminum, just can't do that. So at the end of the day, that's probably David where he's getting hung up on that type of scenario. So at the end, and a lot of times that happens because people don't realize that the way the code is written, it doesn't just stay in one tidy little section. You have to read this, and you might have to comply with this, and then you might have to go to here. And people say, well, how can't y'all write the damn code so you don't have to go jumping all over the place? Well, that's what they're going to try to do a little bit better in the 2029 edition. Maybe, but I don't know it's going to be that fluid. But that's the concept. But we're not creating an installation manual or an instruction manual. It's just trying to make it a little easier to navigate with having to jump all over the place. But maybe that's where his confusion comes in. Okay, but it's got to answer that other question first. So let's see. So let's get back to this table real quick. All right, so here it says size of the largest ungrounded conductor. So if you're just running one set to your equipment, then that to your service, for example, that would be fine. It says, or equivalent area being the circular mills, equivalent area for parallel conductors. So, for example, if I have two sets of 250 kc mill running, supplying the system, two sets, because I needed a certain amount of amps. If I have two sets, okay, of 250 kc mill, okay, then I got ABC in the grounded conductor in one raceway, and ABC and a grounded conductor in another raceway running parallel. then what I do is when it says equivalent area of parallel, you just take one of the phases, just take A. And if that's 250 in that raceway, and it's 250 in that raceway, then you add that. That's what it talks about when it says equivalent area. So it'd be 250 plus 250. So the equivalent area for two sets of 250 kc mil would be 500,000 circular mils or 500 kc mil. If it was that, then what we do is we go to the NEC and we'll go down here and let's say it was 500. So right here you see over 350 through 600. Okay. It's not showing my mouse. So there we go. So over 350 through 600. Okay. Right there. Then it says the size of the grounding electrode conductor is 1 aught. And it would be just that simple. If it was just the one set of 250, then you would be here where it's over 3 aught through 350, and it would be a 2 gauge. Okay, 2 gauge copper. Okay, that's if we're doing copper conductors. If you're doing aluminum, you do this table here. One other misconception that people say is, can I have copper ungrounded conductors, but then end up having an aluminum grounding electric conductor? Yes. Okay, that type of thing. That's not a problem. Okay. All right, let's go back to the lesson. All right, so it says if the grounding electric conductor or bonding jumper connected to a single or multiple rods, pipe, or plates, or any combination thereof, as provided in 250.52A5 through A7, does not extend onto other types of electrodes, okay, that require a larger size conductor. If it's just going to the ground rods and stopping, or it's going from a ground rod and it's jumping over, the jumper goes to a plate, or the jumper goes over to, let's see, a ground to a pipe. Okay, if that's the case, as long as it's not required to be increased in size because of that additional electrode that you're jumping to, then you're okay. You can use the allowances in 250.66 A, B, or C, you're fine. But if you go to one electrode using 250.66 A, B, or C, and you're going to continue on to another type of electrode that requires a bigger grounding electrode conductor, then it's not going to work. Then you can't use 250.66 A, B, or C. You just go back to the table, that type of thing. Right? For example, if I'm running it and looping it through, let's say I'm going to a water pipe ground and I'm going to loop through it, and then I'm going to run continue it onto a ground rod, that type of thing. All right. And let's say since I was going to the ground rod, I'm thinking I could run a 6, but I need a 4, let's say, to the water pipe. Well, I can't go 6 because, again, even though I could do that to the ground rods, it's continuing on and they're smaller. So I use the effect of, well, I could run a 4 to the ground to the water pipe ground, and then is it okay to continue a 4 over to the ground rod? Sure. 250.66 says it just doesn't have to be larger than a 6. Can it be? Yeah, can. That type of thing. Sure, if you want it to be. All right. Let's see here. Oh, by the way, let's go on and show those just really quickly so I can show you the A. So here's A, connections to rod, pipe, or plates. It used to say sole connection. Doesn't say that anymore, so it says it in different language. It says, if the grounding electric conductor or bonding jumper connected to a single or multiple rod, pipe, or plate electrodes, or any combination thereof, as described, does not extend onto an other type of electrode that would require a larger GEC, okay, then the grounding electrode conductor to those rod, pipe, or plates shall not be required to be larger than a 6 copper or 4 aluminum. Okay, and I won't talk about this other type of material. Same thing here for a concrete K electrode. Okay, right here it says that as long as it doesn't continue onto an electrode that requires a larger GEC, then I can run a 4 to my concrete electrode, and it doesn't have to be larger than a 4. Now here's another question, and the same thing for a ground ring, by the way. Here's a ground ring, and here it talks about it does not have to be larger than the conductor that is required for the ground ring, which if you go back and look at the ground ring, it says it has to be at least a 2 gauge, okay? Now, could an engineer make it larger? Sure. Doesn't have to be. Now, here's the next question I get from people. They say, well, if I'm going to ground rods, it says it doesn't have to be larger than a 6. Can it be smaller than a 6? The answer to that is yes. The code just says that it's not required to be larger than a 6, but it could be smaller than a 6. And they go, well, how does that work, Paul? Okay, what if we're running a 100 amp service and we're running those conductors? Let's go look at the NEC, okay? I don't consider an I-beam a plate. It's not a listed electrode. Now, an I-beam that is in-ground steel that's 10 feet in contact with the earth would qualify under 250.52A2. I would not call up an I-beam a plate. It's not listed as a plate. So again, these are listed electrodes, okay? So I would not call that just because it looks like it might be a surface area of a plate, doesn't make it a plate. That type of thing. Okay. So let's see here. Where was I going with this? Oh, real quick. So right here. So let's say it's a service. All right. So real quick, let's do this. Let's go and say that we're doing a service and we're following the code and we went to, and it's a single family dwelling and met all these rules and I'm following the rules and I go to 310. Watch how this works. Watch how this works. I go to 310.12. Okay. Follow me. Make sure you follow with me. Okay. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Where are we at? Right here. So go to 310.12. All right, I'm right here. So here's a 100 amp service, right? In this case, it's 100. And let's just say in this case, single family dwelling. So it is a 4 copper, right? So let's do that, okay? And let's go on and go now back to 250.66. Oh, gotta go the other way. Sorry about that, guys. Go back to 250.66. Right here. Okay. All right. So here you see where it says if we were dealing with a 4, it's 2 or smaller. Okay. Y'all know a 4 is smaller than 2. So this says that the grounding electrode conductor, if I was running that per 310.12A for service, and I had a 100 amp service, and you'll know that 230.79 says it can't be, the service disconnect can't be less than 100 amps. So everything's 100 amps. So those conductors were a 4 gauge, and that's what 310.12 said. So this says my GEC can be an 8. Well, yes, it can be. It can be an 8. The code just said in 250.66A that it's not required to be larger than a 6. Nothing says that it can't be smaller than a 6. So that means that I don't have to use 250.66A. I'm permitted to use it. I might be better off just using table 250.66 in general. Now, there is a caveat. Y'all all know this. If I do run a grounding electroconductor in 8 gauge, then I'm required to protect it against physical damage no matter how I run it. So I'm going to put it in Schedule 80 PVC. I am not going to use ferrous metal raceway because then I got to bond each end. That's problematic. So at the end of the day, I might protect it in Schedule 80. Or I could run 6, and if I'm not in an area that's subject to physical damage, meaning it's running tight against the wall, it's not in an area where it could be damaged. We're not talking about the what-if scenario if an alien came from space and came down with a space axe and started hacking it. Okay, I know inspectors sometimes can get really out there and say, well, it's subject to physical damage. From what? I don't care what anybody says. A normal weed whacker with a normal, just a normal string is not going to damage it. I don't care what anybody says. I don't give a crap. Oh, I've seen it happen. No, you haven't. Now, if you have a weed whacker that's got the chains on it or the blades or whatever, it's possible. But at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things that we get into when we refer to something called likely to become energized, likely to be energized. What does that mean? Well, likely to become energized means that you have a raceway that encloses circuit conductors, which if they malfunction is likely to energize the raceway. Or if you have a piece of equipment where a raceway that houses conductors is connected to a metal enclosure on a piece of equipment, all those things could be likely to become energized. But a piece of non-metallic sheet cable that's running through an attic that just happens to touch a metal water pipe does not make it likely to become energized. We have to start using some common sense, right? So again, it could become energized if a rat gets up there and sits on top of that water pipe and decides to chew through that non-metallic sheet cable. Give me a freaking break, people. Common sense. Common sense. All right? So at the end of the day, those are important things to remember, that I could ignore the allowable uses. And the same thing also goes for the UFER. It says that it's not required to be larger than 4, but it could be smaller than that, okay? Left dog. What's up, Puerto Rico? I didn't, I'll give you some dog. Here we go.
Big dog.
All right, let's get back to the lesson. I said I was going to finish today, regardless of the time. All right, so let's see here. So there we go. So let's talk now. Let's talk about supply side bonding jumpers. Okay, grounding electrical conductors and equipment bonding jumpers sized on the supply side, okay, of the service are determined by service entrance conductor sizes. So there is something important to remember. So grounding electroconductors, equipment bonding jumpers, supply side bonding jumpers, all of that stuff is dictated by the size of the conductors. Whereas in 250.122, its size for the equipment ground is dictated based on the overcurrent protective device. Key things to remember, okay, when sizing, because I get questions all the time. When do I use the breaker? When do I use the conductors? You're pretty much going to use the conductor in most all cases, except for equipment grounding conductor applications where you're trying to clear an overcurrent device, so it has to be based on the overcurrent device. Now, supply side bonding. So here's a meter coming in service. There you go. There's a hub. So this is bonded to this. This is me. All those issues we talked about in 250.92. It's all good. Service conductors, boom. There you go. Service conductors coming in right here. I'm assuming we have some type of issue here. So he's going with a bonding bushing, and he has a supply side bonding jumper on it. Okay. There you go. Supply side bonding jumper. All right. All right, so there you go, and there must be some other impairment down here. And there is your main bonding jumper right here, and it's connecting this grounded conductor through this screw, which we talked earlier in 250.28, has to be green and finish, right? And it has to be visual after the fact, okay, so all that. And then you see here, it connects it to this enclosure. And then this happens to be where they're terminating the equipment grounds and all their bonding jumpers, but you can see that these bars are connected together with a factory supplied internal bar system, okay? That type of thing. And oh, by the way, 250.102C1 is probably one of the better additions to the NEC. It basically took all of the rules that were in 250.66 and extracted them out. And expanded on it because you have a little bit different condition when it comes to these applications. So I'll show you this table real quick. Say, there you go. This is the table 250.102C1 right here. And you'll notice that this table covers minimum sizing requirements for grounded conductors, because you still have to do a load calculation to determine what the load is on your grounded conductor. And oh, by the way, for those grounded conductors, you're going to be sitting here by 250.24 anyway. So the grounded conductors sized minimum here. Main bonding jumpers minimum here. Supply side system bonding jumpers here. Okay. Supply side bonding jumpers here. Okay. For alternating current system, all of them send you right here. Minimum sizes right here. Okay. One thing I'll remind you about grounded conductor, these are minimum sizes here, but in a load calculation, you may need a larger grounded conductor based on your load calculation, okay, 220.61. So these are minimums, okay, that type of thing when it comes to the grounded conductor. But it's a significant table because it gives you all this information. Now, one thing that differs from this table than the 250.66 when it got extracted and put into here is that we also now have a 12.5% rule. So in a situation where you're going to have an application where these conductor sizes over here on the left, where you're over 1100 copper or 1750 aluminum, you have various notes down here, okay? So when you get over those sizes, you're going to use 12.5% of the area of the largest ungrounded conductor or equivalent set, okay? So once you get over 1100, for example, 3 500 kc mills, if you have 3 sets, then you have over 1100 because you'd have 500, 500, 500. That's the A phase, let's say, in each raceway. If you had 3 sets, that would be over, okay? Over 1100 kc mil. That's 1,100,000 circular mills. If you had 3 500s, you have 1,500,000 circular mills. Then the size, for example, of a supply side bonding jumper would be based on 12.5% of that total circular mill. And that's how you would size it to this table. Then you come, you say, okay, I don't follow this. I do the 12.5%, that type of thing. Makes sense? And by the way, I do have an extensive video that covers this over on Fast Tracks Tube, and it still may be available over on the YouTube channel as well. Yep, Coffee Hours Plus, because I said I'm going to finish this come hell or high water. I'm going to finish this today. All right, equipment bonding jumper on the load side of an overcurrent device, okay? So this may be bonding, for example, maybe you have open bottom enclosures. Maybe you have a piece of gear, which the conductor's now feeders. Let's say they're going out the bottom of the cabinet, and you may have metal raceways coming up, and I still got to bond those raceways, okay? So I might need equipment bonding jumpers on the load side. Well, then that's called equipment bonding jumpers, and you're saying, well, how do I size those? Well, these are going to be pretty simple. The equipment bonding jumpers on the load side of an overcurrent device shall be sized in accordance with 250.122, okay? Because there is an overcurrent device ahead of it, okay? So that is going to be 250.102D, which is ultimately going to send you to 250.122. How you doing? High voltage hands. We supported you for your entire trip because that's what we do here. We support our fellow electricians. All right, now, wire type, copper, aluminum, or this other type of material, equipment grounding conductor, must not be less than shown in table 250.122, but in no case are they required to be larger than the circuit conductors supplying the equipment, okay? Now, this is going to change for 2026, right? In 2023 and before, when I run 3 sets of raceways to a piece of equipment and I connect them in parallel, I follow the rules of 310.10 G or H, depending on which cycle you're in. Those conductors in phase A, they all act as one circuit conductor. All of B act as one. All of C act as one, right? So those are the circular conductors. So I add the circular mills of all the A phases, right? And my equipment grounding conductor never needs to be larger than the summation of those A's added together. Well, that's the way it is intended to be because the whole reason we're doing paralleling is to make them act as one. In the 2026 edition, that goes away. It's per raceway. You're only required to size the equipment grounding conductor. Again, doesn't have to be larger than the largest ungrounded circuit conductor in that raceway. But I am going to argue that that single conductor in that raceway, that single ungrounded conductor, is not the circuit conductors. It's just one of the parallel conductors. When they're connected again, they act as the circuit conductor. I don't like where the code panel went. I have documentation. I have information from NFPA's informal interpretation that agrees. But you know what? Let them do what they want to do. That's fine. I'm just kind of giving you the verbiage now. Be careful because your inspector could go either way. He may say, nope, it never has to be larger than the largest ungrounded conductor in that raceway. Or it may say it never has to be larger than the largest summation of all of like one of the phases, which could result in an equipment ground that's actually larger than the ungrounded hot conductor in any given raceway. And that's the way, to me, that's the way it was supposed to be. But we're going to see a change in 2026 for that, okay? Intersystem bonding. Okay, so in a service, in a separate building or detached building, if we've got communication systems in that building, okay, it says an intersystem bonding termination, IBT, for connecting intersystem bonding conductors shall be provided external, okay, to enclosures at the service equipment or meter equipment enclosure, and at the disconnecting means for any additional building or structure. If an IBT is used, it shall comply. The reason I say this is because in a dwelling, for example, you're going to have communication systems that come in, whether it's DirecTV, whether or not it's fiber, whatever you got coming, it's still a communication system. Whatever you got coming there, you're going to have communication systems there, so you're going to have to require this intersystem bonding termination. They make different methods, some that clamp onto the GEC and give you at least the 3 terminals. They allow you to connect up to 3 intersystem bonding conductors. They make the standalone ones where you can run out of the panel or out of the meter and run straight to it and make a connection to it. There are many different offerings, but again, at the end of the day, if I'm going to a detached building, like your garage, maybe it's your work building, if I do not have any communications that are going to be there or never going to be there, then I don't need an IBT there, okay? But if I have a dwelling or I plan on having that, then I need to have an IBT there at those locations. Now, again, at a detached structure, it would be at the disconnecting means. At your structure where your service is going to be, it'd be at the service equipment or at the meter, okay? And so you get to determine this, whether or not you're always going to have the IBT application, I believe, at a service anywhere. I do not believe you'll always have it at a detached structure that's not going to have communication equipment, okay? All right, now, what are the caveats when you do have an IBT? Again, IBT stands for intersystem bonding termination. It has to be accessible for connections and inspection, okay? It can't be locked away inside of a cabinet with, puts this connection inside the cabinet and put a lock on it. No, it's got to be there for inspection. Number 2, consists of a set of terminals with the capacity for connection of not less than 3 intersystem bonding conductors. They make a bunch of different types now. So again, there's not just one manufacturer that makes one of these. Number 3, it says not interfere with the opening the enclosure for a service, building, or a structure, disconnecting means, or metering equipment. I have seen the type that will actually connect on the outside of the meter. Okay, they actually looks like a bar with teeth on it. You connect it on the side of the meter, you tighten it down, it bites into the meter, and it has the screws on the side. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. They are accessible. They have the number of connections. You just have to make sure that when you install it, it doesn't impede the operation of the equipment. That's the main caveat to that. Number 4, at the service equipment, be securely mounted and electrically connected to a metal enclosure for the service equipment, to a metal meter enclosure, or to an exposed, non-flexible, okay, metallic raceway, a service raceway. That means you could have a non-flexible. That means it's not going to be flex. It's going to be like an EMT, rigid, intermediate. Well, you can actually, they make the ones that will clamp on that if service conductors are coming up with it, okay? That type of thing, all right? And it says, or be connected to the metal enclosure for the grounding electrode conductor with a minimum 6 copper conductor. So this is where you see a lot of people will come out and just take out their own separate 6 copper and then take it to one of the mounting devices. And then that'll give them their 3 screws, our little mini bus that they have. Number 5, it says at the disconnecting means, so this is when you do it at the detached structure, let's say, at the disconnecting means for a building or structure that is supplied by a feeder or branch circuit, be electrically connected to the metal enclosure for the building or structure's disconnecting means, okay? They make the ones that mount directly on it. I've actually even seen the ones that go through a knockout, okay? Or be connected to the metal enclosure for the grounding electrode conductor with a minimum 6 copper conductor. Okay, so typically in that enclosure, that's where your GEC comes into, connects to the equipment grounded terminal bus. You'll come out of there with the 6, and then you'll put this little device there that is there with that gives you the minimum number of terminations, and you'll be done. Okay, Lastly, it says the terminals shall be listed for grounding and bonding equipment. Okay. So again, this is what it's for. This is what it's designed for, and it is evaluated as such. And there's many of them out on the market. I'm trying to think of the main one that I see all the time. The manufacturer, daggone it. I'm drawing a blank. There's one manufacturer. I think maybe Ilsco. Maybe Ilsco is the one that's predominantly originally was known for these, that type of thing. All right. Now, so that's pretty much. Now, there's another option here, by the way, when it comes to inter-system bonding. I mean, we don't talk about it here. We're just talking about that. There is another option where you don't want it, because let me tell you something real quick. When you buy those IBTs and they say on it for communication and it's listed for communication terminations, that's all it's listed for. It is not designed to be the interconnection point for things like your PV systems and things like that. It's only for communication. So you're saying, well, what if I want to have an application where I can take all kinds of things to it? Like I can take my other electrodes to it. I can take my dish TV. I can take. Oh, I want a termination that's not limited to just communication. Okay, well, you do have an option. So we'll go look at the code for that, because you do have an option if you want to do this. So let's go to the code, and I'm going to show you. Let's see here. Bear with me. Let's see here. Oops. I'm seeing here. Oops. I keep bouncing around it. Okay, right here. Can you see it? Yep, there we go. Okay, so here is the bonding of communication systems. So this is the one we just been talking about right here. This is A, okay? And you got all these little caveats, okay? And again, you see this in yellow. This is 2023. It reminds it has to be securely mounted to the following, okay? So it's going to limit some of the old type of models that you could use, okay? Because this says it must be secured and mounted as follow, okay? And again, this is the exception on existing buildings and structures, yada, yada, yada. Other means. This is what we want to refer to, and I don't know why it's delaying on my screen, sorry. Other means. So you can buy those IBTs, which are very limited to communication only, or you could do this. Connections to an aluminum or copper bus bar not less than 1/4 of an inch thick and 2 inches wide. Okay, so just so y'all know what we're talking about here, 1/4 of an inch thick, and far as looking at it from the front, we're looking at 2 inches wide. Now, how long? What's the width of it? It only has to be the width to accommodate the application. Okay, it could be 12 inches long, could be 6 inches long. It has to accommodate the connections. Okay, that's the key. It has to accommodate that. All right, and so that part's first. And if you look up here, this is A for that block. Okay, and then this ends up being B, other means. So if you have it copper or aluminum bus, okay. Remember, if it's aluminum, it needs to be at least 18 inches for those terminations from the earth. Y'all know that. We already talked about that. In length, to accommodate the terminations for communication systems, in addition to other connections. So where the other one was listed only to communication, if you do this bus, then you can use it for other types of connections. So these are very common to find. They stand off, they have standoffs, they lift it off the surface, you got a bus, it meets the requirements for the dimensions that are required, and it has multiple holes in it. In fact, a lot of these buses you might see in data centers where they put it as a common location to basically effectively tie everything together. They use the same kind of buses, if you will. Okay? It has multiple holes in the bar and more than enough to accommodate connections. Okay. All right, so as long as you meet that. Now, it says the bus bar shall be securely fastened and shall be installed in an accessible location. It says connections shall be made by listed connectors. Okay, so again, Okay, if it's aluminum bus bar are used, the installation shall also comply with 250.64a. Again, we know that rule, not within 18 inches of the earth. It says the bus bar shall be connected to the grounding electrode system by a conductor that is the larger of the following. Okay, so again, you're wondering how you make this connection. If you remember this one for communication only, right? You remember this one? Then it was talking about the sizing, and you see that it gave sizes, minimum of six, right? Well, this other one says, yeah, well, it's going to be the larger of the following. It says the largest grounding electrode conductor that is connected to the bus bar. Okay, so if I happen to be using this bus bar and have other electrodes, grounding electrode conductors connected to it, okay, then it's saying, all right, well, it's got to be that one that's running from the panel to it. Obviously, that makes sense. It has to be the same size as the largest GEC that's running from it. That's a no-brainer, okay? And then the 2 seconds as required or permitted in 250.94a, right here. So again, it has to be at least a 6, okay? So if I have nothing that's running to it that's larger than a 6, or none of the grounding electrode conductors that I may be running to it that is larger than a 6, then I can go with the 6. It's fine. Can't be smaller. It has to be at least a 6. That type of thing. And for craps and giggles, for those that didn't understand the bar that I was talking about, I want to see if it happens to have an illustration that shows a bar that I'm talking about. No, that's not it. I can't remember. Let's see. Maybe it's here. I know that's just one method there. I thought that they might have had a bar. I don't know why I thought the NEC had a bar image. I guess it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Anyway, trust me, it's just a copper bar, aluminum bar, 1/4 inch thick, 2 inches from wide, and the length necessary to accommodate the number of terminations that are required. And that is different. That is different than the standard IBT that is listed for interconnection of communication. Only thing that can be on that bar is communication. It wasn't evaluated for anything else. So in this bar, it's designed, you meet those minimum criteria. Hell, I can use that for IBT bonding, but I also can bring other things to it as well. Okay, make sense? Okay. I also do show you an example of that bar in our program in our Fast Tracks Tube video. Okay, so you can watch it there as well. Hey, Brian, there's a familiar face. Good morning. Glad to have you here. We're still at it, Brian. We're running over, but I said I was going to go until I finish. All right, we covered those things. Okay, separate buildings, okay, means a means shall be provided for disconnecting all ungrounded conductors that supply or pass through the building or structure. Okay, so this is a separate detached structure. So again, y'all know that the code requires, we're in 225 because we're being supplied by a feeder or a branch circuit to this separate building that I am required, just like disconnects required at the service, I am required to provide a disconnecting means to this detached structure, okay? Oh, by the way, even if it was the allowance to take a single branch circuit to a detached structure, I still have to have disconnecting means. They may be something as simple as a snap switch, but I still have to have disconnecting means to be able to disconnect at that detached structure or building, okay? Just kind of throwing that out there for everybody. If a one-family dwelling has a detached garage with electric power, okay, not all of them do. For example, my detached garage that I'm building is not going to have power in it yet. It's not going to have power. It says at least one wall switch controlled lighting outlet shall be installed to provide illumination on the exterior side of the entrance requirement. So this door right here, okay, if I have power, I have to have lighting for it. This does not qualify as an entrance. So while I've got 2 of them here, that is purely optional. I only need to illuminate this entrance right here. And by the way, this is entrance, egress, in and out, same thing right here. This door, garage door, does not mean that that is an entrance into the garage or into the structure. It's just a vehicle bay entry. It's not, and you look under the code, you'll see it says very clearly That does not, okay, qualify. So let's read here. It says, a vehicle door in a garage shall not be considered as an outdoor entrance or exit. So in this case, this one, we have a lot of people also argue this one. How many, if I ask you how many luminaires had to be here, for example, only the one that illuminates this entry. I'm not required to have one here, but you know me and you always, this is an example where we go above code, we're gonna put illumination. Now, it may be that I put a floodlight right here and it illuminates this door and the driveway. Well, that's fine. It met the rule. It illuminates the entry, but it's also doing double duty. It's doing other things, that type of thing. But this luminaire over here would not be required. This one is the one that's illuminating the entry, okay? And of course, it is going to give some light over here too. But I have a lot of people think that floodlights are required. People say, well, I don't do minimum code. That's up to you. That's between you and your customer. It ain't up to the code. The code is a minimum standard. And people hate when I say that, but it is. As long as you meet the code, you're going to be the minimally safest structure you can. The choice to go above and beyond code, that is a choice that you get to make between you and your customer, not the NEC. Now, it says in each detached garage with electric power, it says at least one receptacle outlet shall be installed in each vehicle bay and not more than 5.5 feet above the floor. Can I have extra ones in there? Absolutely. But I have to at least have one receptacle not higher than 5.5 feet, and it needs to be, the receptacle outlet is for each vehicle bay. If it's a 2-car garage, then I have to have this one on this side over here. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, right here, that is for this vehicle bay. And if you see one back here, we'll say that that's the one for this vehicle bay. And it's in the footprint. Okay, so if you drew a line down the middle of a 2-car garage, this is the one bay, and this is one vehicle bay. This one serves this vehicle bay. This one serves this vehicle bay. They're on the same branch circuit. Okay, and that branch circuit is required by 210.11, I believe C4. If it's there, okay, if you have power, okay, that type of scenario. Okay, what did David says? David says, let's see, what does David say? Let me bring it up, David. Says, what if the building is detached and you don't put a walk-in door? Ran into one of those, just the garage door. Then it does not require illumination. Still would require you to have the receptacles because it is garage, if there is power there, okay? So again, if it is power there, the code only requires that you have the illumination for the entrance to go in and out, okay? Common sense is going to dictate that we have illumination in there if you actually have power there, but that's what we're reading the rule. Now, we can go look at the code in here and go look at 210.70 real quick. A little bit dragging it out. I needed to finish this today, but we can go look. Lighting outlet requirements. Okay, so indwelling units, okay. I'm going to say that it's, the detached garage is not a dwelling unit. Doesn't meet all those elements of a dwelling unit. Here's additional locations other than this dwelling unit. So let's see what it says down here. It says at least one, again, this is, again, additional locations. Let's see here. I just want to look and see. Oh, this is an all occupancy thing. So let's go here. Okay, so let's see. Now this one also talks about attached garages and detached garages. Okay, so additional loads. It says at least one lighting outlet controlled by a listed walk control device shall be installed in hallways, stairways, attached garages, okay, and detached garages and accessory buildings with electric power. Okay, so there you go. There's your answer, David. I don't think that was your answer for the entry part because you didn't have an entry that qualified. But you got to have at least one lighting outlet controlled by a wall switch. Okay, so that's for in the garage. Okay, and then down here it says, let's see here, and it references it right there. So we got that here for dwelling units, attached garages, and detached garages with power. It says at least one exterior lighting outlet controlled by a listed wall-mounted control device shall be installed to provide illumination on the exterior side of the outdoor entrance or exit with grade level access. And it reminds us that a vehicle door in a garage shall not be considered as an outdoor entrance or exit. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, David. Yes, lighting outlet inside. We were talking about the exterior. So if you don't have an entrance going in, it's just a garage door, then it's not required. Not uncommon, David, because in Texas, is exactly what I had. I had a garage, but at the end of the day, it did not have its own separate entrance into the garage. So I was not required to put any lighting out there, that type of thing. Obviously I did, but I wasn't required to do that because I had no direct entrance into that garage, okay? All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's get back and try to finish this lesson up. All right, it says, in each detached garage with electric power, at least, okay, we talked about the receptacle. Now, separate structure again. A grounding electrode shall not be required where only a single branch circuit, including a multi-wire branch circuit, which can qualify as a single branch circuit, even though it's got a red and a black and a shared neutral, you're going to effectively get 2 circuits out of it. As far as the code's concerned, if that's all you're running to your she shed and you're running it to your man squat zone, then if you do that and you're just going to do black for receptacles, the red for the lighting, then I do not have to put a grounding electrode system out there. I use the equipment ground that runs with that branch circuit. If I ran just a UF 12-2, for example, then I'm running a single branch circuit out there. I do not have to put a grounding electrode system in there. Easiest way to remember this is I'm not putting a panel out there. If I was putting a panel out there, then I'm not running a branch circuit or even a multi-wire branch circuit. Okay, I'm running a feeder. If that's the case, then out there at the detached structure, I need to establish a grounding electrode system. Okay, and we all talked about what you do with that. You take your grounding electrode conductor, you take it to the grounding terminal bus, the neutrals get isolated, and you go from the grounding terminal bus down to the electrode of your choice. Probably going to be ground rods. Okay, that type of thing. I guess you could have a UFER as well, is one of those applications. Okay, and that is under the exception for 250.32a. Okay. Now, in addition to the number of branch circuits required by other parts of 210, okay, at least 120 volt, 20 ampere branch circuit shall be installed to supply receptacle outlets in attached garages and in detached garages with electric power. Now, there's a trick, not a trick question. There is a question on our competency review that throws a lot of people, that talks about this, and it brings up the fact that it says about a detached garage, and people think that it requires something to be in there only if there's power there. Not all detached garages have power, that type of thing. You get what I'm saying? All right, so again, got to read the wording to what you're required to have, okay? Now, if I have a detached garage, it's going to have power, then I have to have at least one 20 amp, 120 volt branch circuit out there, and that's going to supply what? The receptacles for each vehicle bay. That's going to typically supply that. That's what it's typically intended for. It's not going to supply lighting outlets, okay? That type of thing. Now, it says this circuit shall have no other outlets. And remember, we're using outlets. Remember that outlets is slang. It doesn't necessarily mean receptacle outlets. It doesn't, because there is an exception in there to be able to supply an outdoor receptacle outlet, for example. But when we talk about this, it's really trying to impose to people that we're not going to put the lighting outlets on it, that type of thing. Now, we do have some exceptions now for a single garage where you have that one circuit in there and the lighting, just like we had for the bathroom where the circuit doesn't leave the room. You do have some allowances now where it's all within one single garage, okay, under those allowances. But we talk about that in a different episode, but just keep in mind that if you have a 2-car garage, if you have a 3-car garage, if you have a 4-car garage, or vehicle, we shouldn't say car, vehicle. I submitted that a couple cycles ago because it used to be car, and I'm like, what about truck? Okay, those type of thing. A vehicle can be vastly different depending on where you're at, okay, in the country. Okay, if you're up in the Northeast, you may park a snowmobile. Maybe that's your main mode of transportation. That's a vehicle. Okay, that kind of stuff. But vehicle sounds better because it covers bigger area than just say car, that type of thing. So, but that's what that circuit is going to be there for. Okay. Let's see here. All right, right here. Okay, separate building or structure again. All right, now we're at that separate building. Okay, we're away from the service. We're away from we're at a separate structure now. It says buildings or structures supplied by feeders or branch circuits must have a grounding electrode system, except for the exception for a branch circuit. Okay, must have a grounding electrode system and grounding electrode conductor installed in accordance with Part 3 of Article 250. Okay, so you're going to follow the rules in 250.50. You're going to follow the rules in 250.52. Choose your different types of electrodes depending on what you have. If there's none that are present part of construction, like a U for ground or anything like that, then you're going to go with probably what we used to call man-mades, which is rod, pipes, and plates, type of man-made electrodes, that type of thing, A5 through A7, those type of things. Now, if you have the panel out there, remember, folks, see this right here? Again, this is the neutral bus. It is floating. This is the main breaker. Don't always have the main breaker. It could be a main lug only with the disconnect outside. Remember, it doesn't have to meet the same rules as 230.85 for services, okay, when it comes to that. So it might be coming in and hitting right here, and that is your disconnect, all right? So you see that the grounds are connected to the enclosure, and then over here, you see this isolated neutral bus. It's floating, if you will. It's off of the metal parts, that type of thing. And you'll notice that there's a 4-conductor setup, right? Okay, just wanted to point those things out before we move too further. Now, it says an equipment grounding conductor as described in 250.118, and that's a long list of different types of equipment grounding conductors. Even raceways could be an equipment grounding conductor. The wire type is in 250.18.1. Tells you it can be a wire type, insulated, cover, or bare. Okay. Shall be run with the supply conductors and connected to the building or structural disconnecting means, which in this case is right here, and to the grounding electrode. So there's your connection right here. Here's your grounding electrode conductor coming up into the remote distribution panel, running over here. Notice it's not going here. Not going here like it would be done at the service. It's coming up here, going over here. Do not leave any green screws in here. Okay? If you got one over here and you want to use it, that's fine. But don't leave it in here. Okay? This is connected to the metal parts. This is isolated. It's floating. Okay? Can't reiterate that enough. Very important safety concern. Why is it safety concern? Because if you were to take all of this to this neutral is going to carry the imbalance. There's always going to have some type of load. Nothing is totally balanced out between phases. So you're going to have current traveling on it. And the last thing we want to do is downstream of the service where people can come in more contact with it. The last thing we want to do is input current onto the metal parts. It's the last thing we want to do. Creates objectionable currents, which we're guarded against in 250.6. And also it can cause other effects on sensitive electronic equipment, circulating currents and everything like that. And it's bad news. Okay, so we're required to construct a system that is free of those objectionable currents to the best of our ability within the National Electrical Code. Okay, all right. It says the equipment grounding conductors shall be, I already talked about all that. Okay. Oh, and by the way, the equipment grounding conductors shall be used for grounding and bonding of equipment, structures, and frames required to be grounded or bonded. Okay. And again, the reason we have this is because this is what's going to clear the breaker upstream for the feeder, right? The grounding electrode system and the grounding electrical conductor is for transient light and surges that affect the outside elements into the building, right? That's it. It's not to clear an overcurrent device. You're not going to use the earth as an effective ground fault current path. The code doesn't let you. The impedance is too high. But that equipment ground that we run with it that's properly sized will make that connection for us, okay? And how is that equipment ground sized? Y'all know this by now. It's based on 250.122, and that is going to be dictated by the rating of the overcurrent protected device that's protecting the circuit conductors. By the way, just for craps and giggles, this equipment grounding conductor is not considered a circuit conductor. So when you hear us talk about circuit conductors in the code, it is not. It's required to be run with the circuit conductors. It is not a circuit conductor. Okay, now the only caveats to that are like in 250.130, where you have an old system that may not have an equipment ground, and the code will allow you to run a separate one under a special condition. Generally, you run all circuit conductors together with the equipment grounding conductor, okay? It reduces impedance, it creates less reactance, and which other problems, which can be what's called counter EMF, which is trying to be in opposition to current flow, which is not what you want. You don't want more resistance in it. You want less resistance in order to clear an overcurrent protected device quicker, okay? Which, don't get me started when you run parallels in your equipment grounds and now they're going to allow the equipment ground to be smaller. Don't get me started. I'll just leave the code panel 5s. I just leave it at that. I don't want to get started on that issue for 2026. I don't have the blood pressure medicine near me. All right. So anyway, there you go. No main bonding jumper installed. All right. So you're charged with preventing objectionable current. Okay. So this is one. Pay close attention here as we're rounding the end of these slides. Prevention of objectionable current. Number one, if the use of multiple grounding connections result in objectionable current and the requirements of 250.4A5 or B4 are met, one or more of the allowing alterations shall be permitted. Number one, let me show you this picture. So let's say the grounded conductor is already connected to this enclosure, right? Which typically it will be in a meter. Right? You can test this. Go out. Here's your test. Then when you're putting in a new system and your meters are given to you by the power company or you go buy a meter, do me a favor, residential. Put your meter on continuity. Touch the neutral bar and then go to any of the threads that are in the meter, okay? And see if it rings out. Well, then you know that grounded conductor is intimately in contact with the enclosure. Obviously, 250.142 permits it, okay? And to be honest with you, it came that way. So some people don't realize that, and they think, well, I have to bond. This is non-metallic. So they go, I got to bond this enclosure to the neutral, right? But it's over here in this equipment. So I'll just run another one through here, right? And so doing so creates a neutral path, but then it also creates another path, and you're creating multiple paths. You intentionally created it. That's the big difference, because some people will say, well, what's the difference, Paul? If the neutral's connected to this enclosure and I use rigid nipple, what's the difference? What's the difference? Well, the difference is we're going to allow you to do that in the code because it's inherently something we've been doing for decades. And we understand that it's really making sure that everything's at the touch potential. That's about all we can do. However, you're intentionally creating objectionable current. You're intending to do that. Now, I'm going to tell you what many of us on the code panel believe, and I know this is going to make the people that make non-metallic sheath cable, that make non-metallic raceways extremely excited, is that while the code turns a blind eye to letting that nipple be metal and potentially creating objectionable current, the proper way to do it and really remove the objectionable current issue 100% is to always use non-metallic connectors or non-metallic nipples between the two. Okay? It's basically the only real way to make sure that you have zero effect objectionable current. And you may have a jurisdiction that says that. You may have a jurisdiction that says, I am not allowing you to use a metal raceway between the meter and the service equipment or the service disconnecting means. Okay? They may say that to you. Well, your only choice is a non-metallic. It separates the two, and you are truly in compliance with 250.6. I think that we have come to accept, and this is why we as a code panel, this is why we cannot define objectionable current. That's why you're not going to see the definition of objectionable current in the 2026 NEC. We can't define it because there are applications where we accept the possibility of doing things that could create objectionable current. But the whole goal here is for you not to intentionally create it. So there may be some jurisdictions that say, nope, I'm not going to let you use a metal raceway between the two. I'm just not going to let you do it. Or some jurisdictions may say, I need you to use a fitting that isolates between the enclosures. Maybe a metal raceway that goes into a non-metallic fitting that is listed for this type of thing, which allows you to transition between metal to a non-metallic. And then you can go into the other. So again, there are other options. Just because something is difficult to do or a pain in the ass doesn't mean it can't be done. So the easiest way to comply with this right here is to simply use a non-metallic raceway. The other thing you're doing, again, is you are creating parallels. And there's a possibility that this conductor is not the same size as the neutral. So if you lose the neutral, the return current's going to travel on this conductor. And it probably is safer to lose that connection possibly altogether than to have it traveling on this conductor and then having it be undersized. And some people say, well, at least it'll work for a while maybe or something like that. But you do have this possibility. And the only other issue is when this comes disconnected and it's traveling on this one, it may give somebody the false impression who doesn't realize that's what's happening and they come in contact with it. Okay. Now, I will tell you this. If this neutral conductor is larger than this conductor, current will travel on both conductors. Again, current travels on all available paths, not the path of least resistance. It travels on all available paths. The amount of current is proportional to the path to which it travels. So if you have a path that has lower impedance, then more current's going to travel on that path than the one that has higher impedance. But that doesn't mean that some is still not going to travel. And as you all know, it only takes 1/10 of an amp to kill us. So again, there's different things that you can do to make it compliant just because it's difficult. But I can guarantee you that 95% of the jurisdictions out there have no problem with using a non-metallic raceway connecting between them. What I don't want you to do is install a third no-brainer, and that is run an additional conductor through there because somebody tells you that you have to run this conductor through here to bond this enclosure. Okay, because typically this is going to be done through the neutral conductor. Okay, so again, think about your install, look at it, use caution, use your meters, find things that you do. Okay, just do the right thing. Now, currents resulting from abnormal conditions such as ground faults, those are not considered objectionable current. Okay, ground faults are what they are. They're very momentary, but those, again, ground faults can happen in a system. Those are not considered objectionable current. So what I don't want is you to deconstruct a system that is designed to carry fault current because somebody misconstrues that fault current as objectionable current. It is not. So at least we make that clear in the NEC, okay? Now, if you do have a situation where you have objectionable current and you're required to mitigate it, then you can make alterations. One, you can disconnect one or more, but not all, of such grounding and bonding connections. Change the location of the grounding or bonding connections, okay? Interrupt the continuity of the conductor or conductive path. Like I said, use a non-metallic raceway. Use maybe a listed changeover between rigid to PVC and then run it into a connector so that you have that separation. Those type of things, still going to have to bond the part of the metal nipple that's connected to the service. Still got to bond it because it's metal. It's on the supply side, so that doesn't remove that. Obviously, you don't have to bond plastic, so that's not an issue. Or take other remediation or approved actions so you work closely with your AHJ and they maybe can give you some additional guidance, unless they don't know. They may not know either. That's when you reach out to people like me. Not to saying I'm the know-it-all, but that's where if you run into that situation and your AHJ doesn't know and you doesn't know, the easiest thing to say is, look, that's just a small nipple. Let's just change that to PVC and just roll with it. That's fine. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to hurt anything. But you have some specs that just don't like PVC. They want everything to be metal. I get it. Okay. All right, so here we go. That's the picture I just showed you. It says connecting a grounded neutral and a grounded conductor in parallel creates objectionable currents on the grounding conductor because the unbalanced current flows through both the grounded and the grounding conductor. Again, it takes all available paths, not the path of least resistance. It's all based on proportional values. Okay, more will travel through a conductor that has lower impedance than one that has higher impedance, but it's still going to travel. And it's still going to be more than enough to hurt you. Okay. Here's the other issue. Okay. If you have more traveling on one than the other, then you still create touch potentials. And so you create an element where something is at a different potential, and we want it all to be at the same potential. Okay. You get me? All those things could come into play. All right. Notice it says the grounding conductor, and then we're talking about the equipment grounding, or not the equipment grounding, because this is just a grounding conductor because there's no overprotective device ahead of it. So this conductor you're using for that right here, okay, would carry all the unbalanced neutral current if it came loose, okay? A hazard would exist if the grounding conductor's ampacity rating is less than the rating of the initial sizing of the neutral conductor. So if it's not the same size, then you could have an issue again. Like we said, it's not sized properly to carry the amount of current that we may see on that neutral conductor. Now, if you say, I don't worry about that, Paul, because I'll make them both the same size, then what you're doing is you're constructing something that is creating objectionable current, and that's what you're not allowed to do, that type of scenario. All right, that's it. I don't need to reflect. Let's go give away some stuff real quick because I am running out. So we're going to do rapid giveaway real quick, or get you on the list, because I kept you longer than normal. So we're only going to do 4 today. So I'm going to put you on the list. Again, I apologize for going over, but I definitely wanted to finish this episode today. And you may have to go back and watch it to relearn something. And those that stayed in here for 2023 NEC Enhanced, you're getting a drawing for the enhanced. Oh no, the grounding and bonding. Speak of the devil, G&B. That is one of our most popular courses, grounding and bonding. And so it's good to have in your pocket because it doesn't expire. It has great illustrations, and it's just a great resource for you. All right. Hopefully you'll win that. Let me make sure you haven't already won that. No, you didn't win that. No lunch today. My lunch is gone. The irony is that we're talking about grounding and bonding today, and it seems to be stuck on grounding and bonding. Okay. Now, Paul, I don't know if you already have that. I think you have mastered the NEC course. Okay, there you go. All right, let's spin again. Oh, you already have it? All right, Paul, we'll spin again for you. Could have saved you money, bro. Sorry, can't give you a refund now. Oh, I did see Rob. I did see you in there, Rob. It might be scrolling now, but I did see you. So you're going to be the one that ends the waffle. Make sure you send me your address. If you already won one and you send it to me, you'll get 2 unless you don't want it. Then we will give it away to somebody else. Let's spin the wheel again here for Paul. He already has it. This is the longest coffee hour yet. And I know 37 of you hung around. All right, Paul, you got the 2023 NEC flashcard. You're in the drawing for those. That's on our website. So you're in the drawing for those flashcards. It's just going to help you learn the NEC's articles and sections to the point where you just practice it every other day. Just go through it. You're going to be quoting things, and it's going to help you in the field. Not necessarily for exam prep, although it's good to know all those code reference, all those articles and parts. but it's just going to help you be able to remember the code a little better. That is available on our website, by the way. If you do have one already, then you can do that. But we don't want to do it where somebody doesn't like the spin they get and they said, just spin again. No, you got to take what you get unless you already have it. So again, but you say you have one, so we'll spin the wheel. This is for Rob. Assuming you already got the wire waffle or got one coming. So we'll go here. So Brandon Schultz, you have a wire waffle coming. Send me your address. And this is for you, Rob. You got the Ohm coin. You're drawing for the Ohm coin. All right, last spin of the day. I'm gonna let you folks go. So Rob, you're in the drawing for the Ohm's coin. Nepo, I'm not sure. I believe. Oh, it's a drawing anyway. So you're in the drawing for the NFC card. So NFC card, you'll get the drawing for that. Again, for those that don't know what that is a nifty NFC card. Tap somebody's phone, put whatever information you want on it. It'll come programmed with our information, which is our site and all this kind of stuff. But if you can reprogram it, it's very easy to do. All right. All right, folks, I kept you way longer than I should today. We covered a freaking lot today. Maybe you got to watch the 5 o'clock replay, okay? Or somebody maybe on YouTube will go in and timestamp it for folks. I'm not going to do it and waste my time. But you could go it. It's not a waste of time, but it's a waste of my time. It may be beneficial for others, but I got other things I got to do. So maybe they'll do that and timestamp it for different things. I don't know. I'm not going to do that, okay? But anyway, go check it out, okay? So everybody have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. Have fun. I'm going to be working on my bass boat. I am changing the oil. I'm going to change the lower unit lube. I'm putting in 2 fresh batteries. I'm going to be cleaning it up. I'm going to be making it ready to take my wife out on the water and do some bass fishing. I'm excited. I'm going to get out there and rip some lips. All right, folks. Till next time, stay safe. God bless and appreciate all of you. We'll catch you Monday for another coffee hour. Stay safe. We'll start a new series on Monday. Take care.